Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Beyond the Veil. We're going to get started here in about 8 minutes, but as is tradition, we're going to do a little bit of a pre-roll, just kind of hang out with everybody while everybody piles into the chat room. We're having one of our dear friends on tonight, and that is Robert W. Sullivan IV. We are going to talk about everything from Mandela Effect to Acacia to Freemasonry, cinema symbolism, so much more. If you have been a follower of the show, or I should say, if you've been tuning into the show, because we don't like followers here, we want to surround ourselves with leaders. That's what it's all about. But if you've been a listener of the show and a fellow leader that has congregated with us in the past, then you'll be very familiar with Robert W. Sullivan and the great work he is doing. Now, the little twin is not able to make it with us tonight. She had other engagements that she had to attend to last minute. So it's just going to be me and Robert tonight. But in the honor of the little twin, we do have the little owl set up there. So she can be with us in spirit, since the owl is the spirit of Cherie Geo. So I want to take a moment to say thank you to everybody that's joined the Facebook group at facebook.com/group/BTV portal. There's been some awesome conversation in there, and we recently did a poll, and it was kind of, I didn't realize what was going on because I was making jokes about people voting and posting little different memes and things like that, because the polls and the whole voting and election and things like that, it just it's wears on me, and it seems to be a circus every 2 years. And but it's funny because we posted a poll and we had everybody voting in our in our group as to the direction of the group and whatnot. So um we'll get started here in just a few minutes. But I did want to say thank you to everybody who has contributed to the group, and Natalie as well, who's been moderating the group too. She's been doing an awesome bang up job. And the poll was, hey, are you guys seeing too many memes? Are you seeing too many off topic posts? What do you feel about the group? And I think the general consensus, and there's about 2,000, almost 3,000 people there now. The general consensus is that everything is awesome and everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. And this is really what I was really trying to do with this group, was just create a group for you guys and gals to move in any direction that you want. And it seems to be going exactly like that, with very little interference from us. So I'm really honored to see that happening. So, we were talking about the Acacia on previous shows, and I actually got into it. I got into a discussion with a very diehard Christian, and I asked her the question. I said, when we went to Egypt and we used the Acacia in the Great Pyramid, in the sarcophagus, rain came down for 3 days afterwards, and there was a huge flood, literally the day of, when we activated the pyramid. And this is all on video, by the way. And the flood was knocking buildings down. It was knocking bridges down. The desert was starving for water. So we go down to the temple of Hatshepsut. We do another ceremony there, and it starts to rain as soon as we get back to the hotel. Huge windstorm. It's flipping boats over in the Nile and whatnot. We go out to Abydos. Same thing happens at Abydos. 3 out of 3 we hit. And I told her, I said, you go to the Bible and you read about the two witnesses, and the two witnesses go out to the two witnesses when they're prophesying for God. They close up the rain, they close up the sky, and they create a drought. And I said, look, the water is the life. You bring water to the desert, and you're bringing life to the desert. But you bring desolence and you lock up the sky, and that's bringing death. And I said, why is this God bringing death? And she kind of filled me into her perspective, but it was a very interesting conversation. We may get into that after we get off with Robert, who we'll be bringing on in about 3 minutes. We'll start the show, but people are piling into the chat room, and yeah, I'm excited about this evening. Oh, here's Natalie. She was first in the chat. What's up, Natalie? Ian, Cush Blunt, Sheila Majors, Heart of the Rebel, At the Coast, Crystal Dragon, Will Meyer, Anik Boy, Cosmos of Compassion, thank you for joining us again tonight. Magas. Is that Magas? Like Magas, like the Greek Magas? Because you know what it means in Greek, right? Like MAGA, M-A-G-A, Make America Great Again. In Greek, it actually means badass. Like that's what you would call a badass, a Magas. And so when I see that, I wonder, did Trump really know that, or is it just pure coincidence? But what's up, Magas, in the chat? And A Sheep No More, and Carlos, Teresa, many, many more. I can't go through all the names here, but thank you for joining us, and we will get started here in just a few moments. Now, Robert has authored some awesome... Dave, you rock, man. Thank you for the donation in the chat room. You guys and gals have been awesome with the donations. Like, we don't even ask for them, and you guys are just sending them, and we're putting them away in a special little place for the next activation site that we're going to go to. It's kind of weird doing a show without the little twin. And I've got so much on my mind right now, but I don't want to take it too far away. I do want to say, one of my friends and one of my brothers, Mark Acusco, just recently passed away. I talked about it before. And we're going to be doing his funeral on the 17th, 10 days from now. So I wanted to dedicate this show tonight to Mark because he's missed. I finally spoke to his wife, who's now his widow. She didn't want to take any calls for the first couple of weeks, and I totally understand. But, she's doing as best as she can, but he was 68. I thought he was 70, but he was 68. But the guy was running around like he was 40. And so it was kind of hard to remember as I was hanging out with him, hey, this guy's 68, almost 70 years old, because I had trouble keeping up with him. And he just got up, he wasn't feeling well, and collapsed. They called the ambulance, but the fog was so bad that they couldn't get a helicopter out there because they needed to send a helicopter out to take him to the hospital in the city, as opposed to this little hospital out here in the middle of nowhere. And he wound up passing away, and turned out to be heart attack. So, yeah, it is what it is. But, if you got to go like that. No adult diapers, no dementia, nothing like that. You're going full force, full speed, driving across the country one day, and then you're gone the next. That's the way I want to go. I don't want to go through all that terrible stuff at the end of life. Off topics, thank you for the donation in the chat. $6.66. That is funny. That the 666 number, that's a pretty interesting number, and maybe we can get into that with Robert when we bring him on here in a few moments. It's the divine feminine number, actually. It's the triple goddess, as we've talked about before. And in the Bible, they talk about the beast, and we've talked about the demonization of the feminine. So, I think we can get started here in just a moment. So, let's do this. The sky so far away tonight, but I can't lose this one, get a pride of a falling night. Thought that I was fit to fight for us to be. You gave me life for loving me. Tell me, where did we go so wrong?
Raw consciousness does not require a savior, but rather, raw consciousness requires only knowledge of oneself and the power to access it. Remember this, as we unlock an even greater gnosis from beyond the veil.
From the Pacific Northwest, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm Chris Gio. I will be taking you beyond the veil this evening. I am not joined by my lovely wife and twin flame, Mrs. Gio, but in her spirit, we have the owl here on her camera because I didn't want to go through the trouble of setting everything up for one camera tonight. But we can flip it over to the one camera view here. And tonight is a very special night because we're joined by our dear friend Robert W. Sullivan, who has authored many books, including Cinema Symbolism, several editions of that, The Royal Arch of Enoch, and he really helped me to fully understand Freemasonry and the correlation between Masonry and the Egyptian mythology that we have naturally been unlocking with the use of the Acacia. And it's funny how this all worked out. Back in 2008, I was looking at DMT. And because Joe Rogan was talking about it, and I was first exploring with DMT to see how disconnected I can get myself and still maintain my consciousness. And while I'm maintaining that consciousness, remembering who I am as I go deeper, deeper, deeper into these states, which were described as near-death experiences. So then the natural progression was DMT to ayahuasca, and the way that we brew the ayahuasca has always been with the acacia. First, it started with the Mimosa hostilis, which is an acacia plant, an acacia species, and then it turned into the Acacia confucia, and then after that, it just kind of progressed from there. And then come to find out that the Egyptians actually had the Acacia nilotica, which grows right there on the River Nile. And there was motif after motif after motif that we found in Egypt that was showing the goddess coming out of the acacia and literally pouring into the mouth of a bird the tea from the acacia. And it was very clear that the Egyptians said, if you want to commune with the gods and goddesses, you need to use the acacia. So we started doing a little bit more research, found out that the acacia is also the central point of Christianity and Judaism. Moses went up to the burning bush and got the 10 Commandments from an acacia tree. And who was it? John the Revelator was on Patmos, and that was an island that had all of these psychedelic plants, and he had nothing else to eat except for psychedelic plants. And so many scholars nowadays are looking at that and saying, hey, look, this sounds like a psychedelic experience. And there was a guy, Benny something, I don't remember off the top of my head, but he actually wrote a paper about how the experiences of Moses sound like a DMT experience coming from the acacia. Now, fast forward to the interest in Masonry. And when I realized that the center point of Freemasonry is indeed the acacia as well, I said, you know what, I've got to look into this a little bit further. And that's when I got connected with Robert W. Sullivan, and when I really started to understand Masonry. And going all the way back to Egypt as well, there's a lot of acacia symbolism. A Set, he captured Osiris by presenting him this sarcophagus, which was made out of an acacia at a party. And he wanted to put him in there to measure it to see if it'll fit him. And he locked him in that box. And then once he locked him in that box, he chopped him up into 13 different pieces, which is very reminiscent of the 13 dimensions that we talk about here on the show. And also on the back of the dollar bill, you see the pyramid with the all-seeing eye above. It's a 13-step pyramid, which I didn't even bother to count until we got back from Egypt. So once he chopped him up into 13 pieces, he buried him underneath an acacia tree. So again, you have more symbolism. If you want to actually see some of these pictures that I'm talking about, we put out a trailer for the film Resetting the Matrix at resettingthematrix.com, where we talk about a lot of this stuff. And you see these motifs of Thoth riding into the acacia, some kind of fruit, and then the pharaoh is inside and he's taking the fruit from the acacia. And it's over and over and over again. The acacia is the tree of life. So if it's the center point of all of these different traditions, I want to know more about these traditions. So I hope we haven't gotten too far off the topic of tonight's show, which will be Freemasonry, cinema symbolism, and much, much more. We have our dear friend Robert W. Sullivan on with us. Robert, how are you doing, sir?
Thank you for having me on this sort of impromptu Beyond the Veil. Always a pleasure to be with you.
It's a pleasure to have you, and we've evolved so much throughout the course of time. I remember talking to you back in, I want to say 2014, and I was still of the mindset that the Freemasons were the root of all evil and so on and so forth. One thing that I didn't mention during this pre-roll is that when I started reading Dr. Rick Strassman's book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule, I found out right in the very beginning that the Freemasons, the Scottish Rite in particular, funded his research into DMT, which it painted a whole new picture for me. So, the Acacia, of course, is the central point of Freemasonry, going all the way back to Egypt. So, maybe you can touch a little bit about the significance of the Acacia. As a matter of fact, in the film Resetting the Matrix, we show a picture of a Masonic lodge in Persham. I want to say that's New Zealand or Australia. I don't remember off the top of my head. But you see the motif right there of the pharaoh and his wife drinking from a cup with the acacia right there. So you've got acacia symbolism literally everywhere and inside of Freemasonry too.
Well, that's right. It turns up in the third degree ritual, and you are absolutely correct in your intro to make the comparison to Osiris, because the third degree ritual is a retelling of that Egyptian mythology, where the Hiram Abiff architect character. One way to look at him, there are numerous interpretations of this. But one of the concealed ones, and it's a correct way to look at it, is the retelling of the Osirian mythology, where Hiram Abiff is a Hiram, a stand-in for Osiris. And when Hiram Abiff is killed, he is concealed in a grave. I mean, again, I've been on with your show before. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but when you're dealing with masonry, you're dealing with loads of solar symbolism. It's everything within masonry ultimately comes back to the sun. So much of it does anyway. And of course, Osiris is a killed and resurrected sun god of Egypt. At any rate, Hiram Abiff is like Osiris. He is killed and he's buried. Hiram Abiff's body is buried west of the temple, of course, west signifying the setting sun, death. And his grave is concealed with the sprig of acacia, which again ties into the Osirian mythology. It's a solar emblem. You're correct that it grows along the Nile. If you read Masonic historians, it's a flower. It's the sprig of acacia, sacred to the sun god Apollo. So again, we're overwrought with solar symbolism again. And of course, the candidate is Hiram Abiff is ultimately resurrected, exactly like, Osiris was. And when the candidate is resurrected, he has a substitute word whispered in his ear, which is it's not the true name of God, it's a substitute name. And again, this ties into the Egyptian mythology with Isis, the virgin consort of Osiris, who resurrected him through the correct pronunciation of the name of God, of a name of a sun god named Amun-Re. She had his secret name and pronounced it correctly, used magic to resurrect Osiris. And this is exactly what you have going on inside the Blue Lodge. You have the resurrection of the candidate as Hiram Abiff, and he has the substitute name of God whispered in his ear. The word, the true name, is lost upon the death of Hiram Abiff. This is what's called the lost word of a master mason. And this isn't ultimately recovered. This word is eventually found in the high degree ceremonials of Freemasonry, the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, where the name of God, the Tetragrammaton, is eventually recovered. And you'll find, I'll just end on this, you will find, again, more Egyptian symbolism in the third degree ritual, where the candidate is raised upon something known as the 5 points of fellowship. And the 5 points, of course, form a pentagram. And that's within Masonry the symbol of the Egyptian dog star Sirius, which is, of course, the star sacred to Isis. So again, we have this, entire homage symbolism going on to ancient Egypt with Osiris, Isis using the secret name of God to resurrect Osiris. And of course, we have the candidate as Hiram Abiff or Osiris being resurrected upon the 5 points, signifying the pentagram, Isis, Sirius, and of course the whispering of the substitute name of God, which is a complete hidden, veiled reference, maybe not so much anymore, to Isis raising Osiris. And of course, I remember a few days ago, I've mentioned this on other shows. I probably mentioned it here before, but I'll just go back into it real quick. We were bandying some emails back and forth. And of course, you've heard the term that Freemasons are widows' sons. And again, the widow that, esoterically referring to is Isis, who's widowed upon the death of Osiris. So, yeah, we have loads of Egyptian solar mythology, solar symbolism in the Blue Lodge, and the sprig of acacia is just one of them, being the concealer of how Hiram Abiff's grave is ultimately concealed. When he's buried, his grave is concealed with the sprig of acacia. And again, this is how they find him also. So again, it's a solar emblem sacred to the sun god Apollo, and ties into, as you correctly said at the beginning, with the Osirian mythology of ancient Egypt.
That was a lot of information you just dumped on us. So let me take a couple of steps back. So the Tetragrammaton. I've got that up here on the screen. Can you explain to people what we're looking at?
Yeah, what you're looking at there is the Eliphas Levi drawing of the pentagram, which again, that can the pentagram can signify numerous things depending on the context. In the case that you're showing me, this is white magic. The 1 point is up, the 2 points are down, and of course you'll see the name. You'll see the word Tetragrammaton written around it. The Tetragrammaton is the name of God. It's just a fancy way of saying the name of God. We Masons don't actually have the name; it's purely ceremonial. Of course, the traditional name of God, depending on what religion you are, Yahweh, Vaheh, say it back, it's Jehovah, is generally thought to be the name of God. What you're looking at there is the pentagram with Tetragrammaton written around it. I believe this comes out of the writings of Eliphas Levi, who is a French ceremonial magician and transcendentalist. He wrote a book called The Morals of, I believe, The Rituals of High Degree Magic. He wrote several books. A lot of the works of Levi turn up in Albert Pike's book, The Morals and Dogma of Scottish Rite. In fact, in numerous places, he literally plagiarizes Levi verbatim. And again, the pentagram, this can signify numerous things depending on the context. It could deal with the Egyptian dog star Sirius as a reference to Isis, who possessed the secret name of Amun-Re, the Tetragrammaton that she used to resurrect Osiris. The pentagram was sacred to Pythagoras, the famous Greek mathematician. And of course, he is instrumental within Freemasonry. The pentagram, when it's upside down with the 2 points up and the 1 point down, that's usually left-hand path. That's the darker magic. So when the 1 point's up, that's white magic. So this would be correct. This would be the name of God. This would be positive. Yeah, and there you have it with the 2 points up, the 1 point down. That's the left-hand path. If you ever pay attention to the movie The Wizard of Oz, take a look at the next time you watch it. Take a look at Glenda's wand, the Good Witch. There, her wand is tipped with the pentagram, and it's the 1 point up, identifying her as a white magician, of course. So yeah, it's the Tetragrammaton is just really a fancy way of saying the name of God, but it is critical within Freemasonry and within Masonic symbolism and legend and lore, because the ritual, the third degree ritual, really revolves around it. The lost word, the lost name of God, which is lost in the third degree ritual, however, recovered in the high degree ceremonial in the York and Scottish Rite, known as the Royal Arch of Enoch.
Very interesting. So I see quite a bit of symbolism here. I can identify some of it. We have the Merkaba here, or the Star of David. This is a Shriner sword, but I don't know the symbolism behind that. Of course, we have the Eye of Horus is here, the left and right eye. Eye of Horus or Eye of Raharakti, and several other symbols. We have the Alpha and the Omega here. Can you explain what we're looking at?
Well, it's the pentagram with the word Tetragrammaton written around it. Again, I don't see, depending on the context of it or how it was used, it could signify Pythagoras. It could signify, as you are correctly indicating, with the Egyptian symbolism, the pentagram associated with the Egyptians. It could, if it's Masonic, and you're indicating it's coming out of a Shriner temple or a shriner, what is a sword? If that be the case, it's probably referencing Isis, who possessed the secret name of God, which would explain, the all-seeing eye of Horus. Of course, when she conjured magic and resurrected Osiris, the purpose of this was for her to sire, or Osiris to sire Horus, who is his solar stand-in. At that point in time, Osiris goes off and becomes this, I don't know, best way to describe it is like a solar god of the underworld. His stand-in is Horus, and of course, Horus takes Osiris's place. So yeah, if we're looking at it through an Egyptian Masonic context, that would be correct. This image, I'm pretty sure, right off the top of my head, comes from the works of Eliphas Levi. In fact, I have that exact image inside the Royal Arch of Enoch. I lifted it, I believe, from the Levi book, which I believe is the Rituals of High Degree Magic. I'd have to check off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean the pentagram. It's a very old symbol, and it can symbolize numerous things depending on the author's creator. In this case, it seems to be signifying the name of God, reference to Isis, who possessed the secret name of God to resurrect Osiris. We have the all-seeing eye of Horus in there. So definitely a lot of Masonic Egyptian symbolism based on what I'm seeing.
So right here, this is I'm getting a little bit of an echo from you. I don't know if you can turn it down just a tad, but
Yeah, let me do that. I'll move away also.
okay, fantastic. So on the screen right now, I have an illustration from Duncan's Masonic ritual,
Hmm.
and this
Yep.
is an illustration of the third degree, where the candidate is still in darkness, and there's a sprig of acacia right here. Can you explain this motif a little bit?
Right. Well, this is where they're getting ready to. This is from Duncan's Masonic Monitor. I have that in my library here. I recognize that illustration immediately. What you're looking at is the candidate. Let me blow this up a little bit. Hang on one sec. See if I can't get a better look at this. 1 minute. That's not letting me blow it up for some reason.
Now, let me see if I can get it a little bigger
Mhm.
on the screen, but
Yeah, it's just very small on the image, right? I can see it better now. That's a little bit better,
okay.
right? What you're looking at is this is where they're getting. This is where it looks like, if I recall correctly, this is you're absolutely right. This is in the third degree ritual. This is the Master Mason degree, and this is where the candidate is dead, and his body has been located. And I believe this is where they're kind of reading the benediction almost over him. And this is probably where they're getting ready. King Solomon is going to show up and is going to raise him from the grave and welcome him into Freemasonry. He's going to be, dead and born again, resurrected. Again, that's a very popular motif, especially when you're dealing with solar godmen. Um,
So
so
why
yeah,
why is the death and resurrection important for the candidate to go through? And I think this is one of the big criticisms of Christianity is they say that you're supposed to be dead and then rise in Christ, and they take this in a religious context, but it's really not religious. But what is the significance of the blindfold? The significance of the resurrection?
right. Well, the candidate is symbolically dead at this point, so the blindfold. When you do the ritual, you're blindfolded. You're in a state of darkness. The blindfold comes off when you're resurrected. The whole idea of the what I call the dead and resurrected solar God man. I mean, this is as old as time. This predates Christianity. Like I said, you can look at the Osirian mythology in Egypt. You can look at numerous, comparative religion studies of dead and resurrected saviors. I mean, my goodness gracious, you'll even find this in cinema. I mean, you could call this character Hiram Abiff. You can call him Osiris. You can call him Jesus Christ. You could call him, Harry Potter or Neo. It's the pretty much exact same thing. So the whole idea within Masonry is you're symbolically killed, your old self is gone, and you're resurrected, and you're brought back to life as sort of this new being who is going to be spiritually awakened and be able to affect positive change in the community. Your old self is gone, you've been born again in Masonry, and you're now this moral being. Or a more moral being is probably a better way to describe it. And you can affect positive change in the community. That's the whole underlying philosophy of the Blue Lodge ritual. It's sort of like being what I would call, I think I've been on your show, mentioned this before. It's kind of like divine spark ignition, resurrecting the Christ in you almost. And, now you're able to go out and be a different person, and you've been born again. The old self is gone. You've been brought to, Masonic light. Very popular expression. You've been brought from darkness to light. And yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea behind it. Like I said, it's a very old motif. It predates Christianity, and it's really what I call in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. Sort of, it's what I would best describe as like a Gnostic reawakening or awakening, where you're killed and you're brought back to life. it's like experiencing gnosis almost, and it's like an epiphany, and now you can go out and affect positive change. So that's what that image is illustrating. That one is the one you're seeing now. This is the candidate. I believe this is from Duncan's Masonic Monitor again. This is the candidate. I don't know what ritual this is from. I'm presuming it's from the third degree. This would be where you are taking your obligation before the worshipful master. The candidate is blindfolded, and he is at this point. What you're seeing on the screen is the candidate would be taking his obligation on the Bible, depending on what degree they are in, whether you're in the first degree, second degree, or third degree. A lot of the ritual work does echo itself. It repeats itself. Some of it tweaks, of course. But that's what you're looking at right there, is the candidate taking his Masonic obligation on the Bible at the altar, in front of the worshipful master. That's that illustration.
So I've spoken to a few different Freemasons, and I get different answers. Some say that none of this should ever be spoken about. Others say, well, as long as it's in the public domain, it's perfectly fine. So anything from Duncan's Masonic ritual is already published, and so there's no issue with talking about it. If I'm asking any questions that are, in a violation of your oath or anything like that, please let me know. But the question that I want to ask you is, what is the significance of the cable toe?
Right. Well, no, the general consensus with this is, with the Masonic secrets, is you can talk about the ritual, you can talk about the history, the philosophy, all that. What you're not supposed to give up is like the hand signs, the tokens, the grips, the passwords. That's the stuff that's the tokens of recognition is what that's called. That's the stuff that's technically off limits. When I get into it in the Royal Arch, I just write the initials down. That's really as close as I'll get. But as far as talking about the ritual and the symbolism, that's okay. No Mason really should come down on you for that. You read other Masonic authors such as Manly P. Hall, Albert Mackey, who was a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason. They all said that's fine. You just don't want to give away the tokens and the handshakes and the passwords, things like that. The cable toe or the noose. This is put around the candidate's neck, and when after you've taken the obligation, the cable toe is removed from around your neck. My understanding of it is quite literal. That if the candidate essentially went through the ritual and panicked, or something, or started to remove the blindfold, said, I want out of here, I'm not going to do this, or refused to take the oath, or didn't want to be a part of it. My understanding is it dates back to Masonry's inception. You couldn't get away with this today, is you would literally be dragged out by the cable toe around your neck, and you'd literally be thrown out of the lodge complex, or at least out of the lodge room. That's quite literal. You had a noose around your neck, almost as like a safety device, where if the candidate, all of a sudden said, I'm out of here, screw this, they would literally grab it and pull you out and, get you out of the complex, out of the lodge room. That's my understanding of it. I don't think that would happen anymore. But that's my understanding of what the cable toe was there for. As far as the costuming and things like that, it's to make you feel out of place. They want you to feel uncomfortable. That's intentionally done. I joined a fraternity house when I was at Gettysburg College, and the guy who actually wrote the ritual for my fraternity house was a Freemason, and you'll find a lot of the parallels between the two rituals. But when you get into that with the costuming and things like that, it's designed to make you feel uncomfortable. They want you to make you understand that you're not one of us yet. You're intentionally somewhat, I guess humiliated is the word. Probably too strong of a word, but it's made to make you feel out of place and sort of an outsider. That's intentionally done. And the cable toe is, like I said, a safety device where if you started acting up, they could literally throw you out of the lodge room.
Interesting. So I think it's the first time we've really gotten down to a lot of the symbolism and the meaning behind all of this, with illustrations on top of all of this. So it's really fascinating that we get to speak on these topics here. So back to the Acacia. I know from previous shows you've said that the Acacia actually shows up in the Scottish Rite as well, and there's much deeper stories to the symbolism of the Acacia. Can we go into that briefly?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. I don't think I've ever said that. I only know it in the Blue Lodge context. It might turn up in a couple rituals in the Scottish Rite. I'd have to go look that up. I concentrated on the Royal Arch of Enoch, and I do not believe that it turns up in that ritual. I'd have to go look, but I don't recall it in the Scottish Rite off the top of my head.
Okay, okay. Um, I remember a sprig of acacia degree.
No, I don't. I don't recall that.
No. Okay.
No.
Okay.
There is differences between the jurisdictions, and the rituals have different titles in different jurisdictions. It could be there. There are, whatever it is, 30, whatever it would be, 20, let's see, 29 other degrees. I'd have to go look. It certainly could be in there. Just off the top of my head, I just don't recall it right off the top of my head.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. So as things begin to evolve into the um, higher degrees of Freemasonry, how does this symbolism start to open up? How does the story of Hiram Abiff begin to evolve?
Oh, it disappears. It's gone. Hiram Abiff is long dead. And then you get into the building of the Second Temple, and at this point in time, you get into the construction of the Second Temple, which is known as the Temple of Zorobabel. You will often see on Scottish Rite literature um, the phrase "rebuilding the temple." That is exactly what they were talking about. The Temple of Solomon is long gone, and you get into these biblical stories coming out of the Old Testament, coming out of some of the apocryphal text of the Jews being held in. This is after the sacking of the Holy Land by Cyrus the Great. The Hebrews are held in captivity in Babylon, and a Persian monarch, Cyrus the Great, dispatches a Jewish governor named Zorobabel, whose name literally means the heart, path, or mouth to Babylon, depending on how you want to translate it, to reconstruct the Second Temple. And then you get into this incredibly important high degree ritual, which I argue is probably the most important ritual in all of Freemasonry. It's really the end of the story of the Masonic ritual, of the Masonic mythology, where they're building the Second Temple. And this is on the Holy Mount in Jerusalem, and they discover the secret subterranean underground chamber. And in it is, this is as close you'll get to Hiram Abiff, is you'll find the lost word of the Master Mason. The secret word of Hiram Abiff is found. It's recovered in this high degree ritual. The name of God is restored. It's recovered. And when you really come to understand the ritual and a lot of its underlying philosophy and symbolism, this is really the high degree ceremonial that is defining the United States of America. This was the ultimate degree in the Thomas Smith Webb system. This was, the possession of, even if it was symbolic, of the Tetragrammaton. This was sort of formed this Masonic, clerisy that was really pulling the strings behind the government in its early days. This is where a lot of the conspiracy theory comes from, which still exists to this day. With Masons working behind the scenes, through these high degree bodies. It's a lot of deep Masonic ritual, or excuse me, history that goes on, and again, it ties into. I don't want to get too off topic, but it has to do with, especially in the context of the United States, where there was no at the early days of the United States, there were two fraternal orders, secret societies that were very popular. Masonry was probably number one, and then number two, right behind it, was a group called the Odd Fellows, which was, believe it or not, the first Grand Lodge was right here in Baltimore, Maryland, which is where I am, started by a guy named Thomas Wildey, who's buried not too far away from me in Greenmount Cemetery. He's in there with John Wilkes Booth, of all things, very old cemetery here in Baltimore.
Well, let
At
me
any
let me jump
rate,
in for just a moment because I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that John Wilkes Booth was actually a Freemason, and
false.
that the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was a Masonic plot.
No, that's false. What's funny with the Booth family is they were all Freemasons. Just about every one of the Booth family is a Freemason except for one, which is John Wilkes Booth, of all things.
Oh, really?
He is the only. Yeah, it's the exact opposite. All his brothers and his father were all Freemasons. He did not join it. He's the only one who didn't. So yeah, they were all Masons except for John Wilkes Booth. He's the only one. It's funny that it worked out that way, but he was the only non-Freemason in the family.
Interesting. Interesting. Um, Because I know that Freemasons, in at least historically, they're usually banned by dictators. I know in Egypt right now, Freemasonry is banned. Hitler went after the Freemasons just like Jews, because Freemasons have a tendency to, I don't want to say overthrow governments, but I mean, historically speaking, that's what happens. Here in the United States, they overthrew the British government and they created the
That's
United
true.
States of America. They've always been there kind of keeping governments in check. And if governments ever got too tyrannical, they've always been there to overthrow things, which I thought, looking at the Booth connection, the first thing I thought was, well, it makes sense. But I couldn't understand the angle. Like, why would they want to assassinate Lincoln? But I guess that's just a misnomer.
Yeah, that's kind of mythology almost. There, um, Freemasonry. It loses popularity after the Morgan affair of the 1820s. It survives it, but it's not as popular. Lincoln was not a Freemason. There are Freemasonic generals. I mean, there are Freemasons that served in the Civil War on both sides. In the Confederacy and in the Union. Um, I guess Albert Pike being one of the more famous ones. He's interesting because he's a Northerner, and he fought for the Confederacy. That's kind of an odd paradigm there. The Northern Democrats who sided with the Confederacy were known as Copperheads, and that was what Albert Pike was. But no, there was there were Freemasons on both the Union and Confederate side. Lincoln never joined a Masonic lodge. He had expressed interest in joining. He never did, and he said that when he left the White House, when he retired, or when his presidency was over, he was actually going to join a Masonic lodge back in in Illinois. Obviously, he never got the opportunity. Because he was assassinated in 1865. But no, Lincoln was not a Freemason, and to my knowledge, there was no Masonic plot to kill him or anything like that. True, there could have been there could have been Democrats, or enemies of Lincoln who were Freemasons who weren't fans of him. But to my knowledge, the entire plot to kill Lincoln or kidnap him was not Masonic in any way, shape, or form. You are correct, though, to an extent. I don't disagree with you with that the Masons, they're certainly instrumental in the American Revolution. That's irrefutable. They are banned by a lot of dictators. Hitler did not like them at all for several reasons. Number one was he saw them as a Jewish organization. A lot of as the rituals, revolve around the Judaic
Right.
on their face. Solomon's Temple, that obviously didn't go over. And then, of course, with Himmler, with the SS, they viewed the Freemasons as sort of like a competitive, esoteric order, and you don't want you got to get rid of your competition. So the Freemasons were persona non grata in Nazi Germany, and you're correct, absolutely correct. Again, in communist Russia, again. It was seen as a sort of subversive order. It thrives in the United States, even with the revolution, and we're in England where it's founded, or at least officially comes on the map in 1717. But no, Freemasonry, my goodness gracious, is instrumental in the creation of the United States of America. That's irrefutable.
There were only 14 Masonic presidents: George Washington, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, James Polk, James Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, et cetera, et cetera, Harry Truman, Franklin Roosevelt, Gerald Ford. And that's where the list kind of ends. A lot of people will point to George W. Bush and say that he's a Freemason. People will point to Bill Clinton and say that he's a Freemason, but I haven't been able to find any evidence to substantiate that. Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, none of them are. George W. Bush, the Bush father and son tandem, are skull and bones at Yale University. That is not, I guess you could call it Masonic-like. It's a college fraternity. A lot of the college fraternities are Masonic-like, because they come out of Freemasonry, believe it or not. I mean, a lot of the rituals in colleges and sororities were written by Freemasons, so that really shouldn't come as a surprise. But Skull and Bones is not associated with Freemasonry proper in any way. The Bushes are not Freemasons. Bill Clinton, I believe, is de Molay, but that does not make you a Freemason. And if you're not familiar, if the viewer is not familiar, de Molay is the easiest way for me to describe it is the Masonic Boy Scouts. Um, it's a Masonic order for young men. It's named after Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar. I can't remember. It's founded in either the early 20th century or the late 19th century. I want to say it's founded in the early 20th century by a guy named Dad Land. The guys who run run de Molay get the nickname Dad. Um, Dad Land was the founder of de Molay. One of the guys who he was very good friends with was Walt Disney, of all things. In fact, there's a very famous picture of Mickey Mouse that Walt Disney drew dressed up in de Molay regalia that Walt Disney gave to Dad Land. But de Molay it's a Masonic order, but you are not a
Dad, as in
Freemason.
DAD.
Yeah, Dad, as in father. Yeah, Dad Land. He was the founder of de Molay. I forget his first name. I think it was Frank.
That's kind of creepy for some reason. I don't know why. It just doesn't strike me.
Yeah, it's just a nickname. It's just a nickname that these guys that is given to him. You see it all the time with the de Molay, with the guy, Dad something. It's just a nickname that's given. Dad Land was the founder of it. He was good friends with Walt Disney, and Disney was in de Molay, but he was not a Freemason. Same with Bill Clinton. So yeah, when you get into the Masonic presidents, the last one you had was Gerald R. Ford. You're correct, and none of them were Masons after that. Reagan was given an honorary 33rd degree, but it's honorary. Most Masons really don't count Ronald Reagan as a Freemason. But no, Jimmy Carter, the Bushes, Barack Obama, Donald Trump. Who am I leaving out in there? I don't know. It sounds about right. None of them are Freemasons. The last Masonic president was Gerald R. Ford. And then before him, you've got to go back to Harry S. Truman, I believe.
So I want to take a quick break here in about 3 or 4 minutes. I do want to ask you about the symbolism on the back of the dollar bill. I'm sure you've covered this many times before, so I hate being redundant, but I'm trying to pull up an image here just to get it here up on the screen. But maybe you can help explain the Novus Order Seclorum and any Masonic symbolism that we find here
Sure.
with the all-seeing eye. I mean, I know the all-seeing eye is definitely a Masonic symbol. It originated, though, as a Christian symbol, and a lot of people don't realize this. You find it in a lot of Christian works and a lot of Christian churches, even still to this day. But how did it get incorporated into Masonry?
Well, right. You'll find it. You'll find it on documents and degree certificates, and in Masonic lodges. It predates. I mean, it predates the dollar bill, is what I'm trying to say. It's known as the Eye of Providence, the Eye of Horus. That's another way of calling it. It's a symbol for deity. That's really what it boils down to. It's a symbol for God, and of course, Masonry is deistic and believes in a supreme being. What that supreme being is left to the individual Mason to up to them, essentially. But to make a long story incredibly short, it's just a symbol for God, nothing more than that. The Eye of Horus, the Eye of Providence. Like I said, you'll find it. You're absolutely correct, Chris. You'll find it on Christian, in Christian iconography. Masonry uses it. Like I said, you'll find it on degree certificates, on mosaics, in Masonic lodges prior to it getting on the $1 bill. The $1 bill, the Great Seal. What you're actually looking at with the dollar bill it's the obverse and reverse of the United States. It's the Great Seal of the United States of America. It's more of a solar emblem. It has some Masonic symbolism in it, no question about it. It's interesting how it got there. It was actually urged to be put on the back of the $1 bill by Henry Wallace, who I believe was Franklin Roosevelt's Secretary of Agriculture, who got it from a guy named Nicholas Roerich, who was a Russian mystic. And they said, hey, this symbol is great. Let's put it on the $1 bill. And FDR, who was a Freemason, did. It's gone through many changes. The one thing I would say that really stands out from a Masonic standpoint is the incorporation of the number 13 on it. That is strictly Freemasonic, and that comes out of the high degree system because the 13th degree in the Scottish Rite and the 13th degree in the original Rite of Perfection, which the Scottish Rite is based on. The 13th degree is what else but the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. This is the recovery of the Tetragrammaton, the name of God. So by putting the number 13 on the in the seal, it's really a form of Kabbalah. It's investing the seal with divinity, the name of God. Is really what is the motivating factor behind it. It's nothing sinister or anything like that. And you'll find like even in Washington D.C., the Scottish Rite Temple sits 13th degree, 13 blocks from the White House, 13 Royal Arch of Enoch. You'll find this in movies, for example, with and I guess
I did not, Robert. I did not know this. We've traveled with the use of the Acacia through 13 different dimensions, and typically the way that I looked at it is there were 12 dimensions, but I realized that there was a way to access a 13th dimension. I don't know how familiar you are with what we did in Egypt, but essentially we spent the night in the pyramid and used the Acacia within the sarcophagus of the king's chamber, and that launched us up to a 13th density. And I didn't even count the steps here, the 13 steps, but this is a 13-step pyramid, and now you're talking about 13 degrees of Freemasonry and different, access points. It's amazing.
What needs to be explained is why how does the name of God tie into wisdom and knowledge and enlightenment? That needs to be explained. If you want to take a break, I could do it after the break, or if you wanted me to keep going, I could do it real quick. I could do it, relatively quick. You make the call. I can do it when we come back, or if you want me to do it right now.
Yeah, let's take a quick break.
But we should get into that because that's important for the listener to understand what's going on in the ritual, what's the underlying philosophy. Philosophy is because when you understand that, you'll have a greater understanding of why this degree is so important.
Excellent. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back in about 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
The Godhead is never an object of its own knowledge, just as a knife doesn't cut itself, fire doesn't burn itself, light doesn't illumine itself. It's always an endless mystery to itself. If you think that you understand Brahman, you do not understand, and you have yet to be instructed further. If you know that you do not understand, then you truly understand. For the Brahman is unknown to those who know it, and known to those who know it not. And the principle is that any time you, as it were, voluntarily let up control, you have an access of power, because you're wasting energy all the time trying to manage things, trying to force things to conform to your will. The moment you stop doing that, that wasted energy is available. And therefore, you are, in that sense, having that energy available, you are one with the divine principle. You have the energy. When you're trying, however, to act as if you were God, that is to say, you don't trust anybody and you're the dictator and you have to keep everybody in line, you lose the divine energy. Because what you're doing is simply defending yourself. So then, the principle is, the more you give it away, the more it comes back. Now you say, I don't have the courage to give it away. I'm afraid. And you can only overcome that by realizing you better give it away because there's no way of holding on to it. The meaning of the fact, you see, that everything is dissolving constantly, that we're all falling apart. We're all in a process of constant death. See, that fact that everything is in decay is your help, because there's nothing to hold on to.
Travelers, always remember to walk uprightly and circumscribe your desires. As we travel upon the level of time, to that undiscovered state of consciousness, traveling to the place where once obtained, no traveler returns. The place of raw consciousness which awaits us when we have passed beyond the veil.
All right, new revelations about the number 13 with Robert W. Sullivan. The little twin is back, and they sent her home because she's not feeling well. She's been fighting off some kind of virus, and they looked at her and said, no, you can't be here. So she may be popping in for just a moment, but she's not going to do the show. But in her honor, we have the wise owl here. But let's get back into this 13 symbolism. And let me say thank you to Siler and everybody else who's been sending donations during the show. Dave Reddy as well, and Off Topics, and many more. So thank you all. But let's go back to Robert to pick it up where we left off. Robert, please take us away.
Right. So what you have going on in this 13th degree is where the candidate, this is the Royal Arch of Enoch ritual, they discovered the Tetragrammaton. Why this degree is so important? It has to do with the underlying philosophy of the name of God, and it gets into Enoch, and of course the Masonic ritual that Enoch, because of his celestial visit in the book of Enoch, he comes back to earth with this wisdom, writing arithmetic, mathematics. And he gets wind that the flood of Noah is coming. So he takes this wisdom, inscribes it on two pillars, and he puts it in this subterranean vault with the sacred name of God on this golden delta between the two pillars. And the way it works is, through correct pronunciation of the name of God, you can restore the wisdom on the pillars back to mankind. And this is what, when the candidate gets the word, he's becoming this symbolic God figure. We talked about earlier in the Blue Lodge how it's a sort of a Gnostic reawakening. Well, possession of the Tetragrammaton is it's a form of like what I would call Kabbalistic apotheosis. You become a godlike figure. And in the context of the United States, this was what gave you the warrant to rule. If you had the name of God, you were given license. You had the name of God, you could rule over other people by default. This is where the whole Masonic conspiracy comes from, that Masons were ruling because they, quote unquote, possessed the secret name of God. This is what this whole conspiracy originates from. But getting back to why this number 13, it's the 13th degree. Like I said, in the Scottish Rite, it comes out of the Rite of Perfection, where it's also the 13th degree. The Tetragrammaton is in the subterranean vault with these two pillars. In the underlying Masonic philosophy, it's the restoration of wisdom back to mankind. On the one pillar, you have all the mathematical wisdom, and on the other pillar, you have the restoration of the 7 liberal arts and sciences, or inscribed upon it. In the Masonic lore, the vault is breached before the Masons get there. These two figures go down and breach the vault. They don't do it simultaneously. The first person to breach it is Pythagoras, the Greek mathematician, who goes down and has his eureka moment down in the vault of Enoch, right? I have found it, and correctly pronounces the name of God and restores mathematics back to mankind. And then the other character you have that goes down and correctly pronounces the name of God is this Hellenistic god known as Hermes Trismegistus, who correctly pronounces the name of God and restores the 7 liberal arts and sciences back to mankind. If you have the iPhone, you will constantly see statues of Hermes around libraries and things like that. And there's a reason for that. That has to do with the restoration of the 7 liberal arts and sciences.
Can I jump in before we move too far off from Hermes? I've heard in some traditions that Hermes is actually the reincarnation of Thoth. What do you think about that?
Well, the word Trismegistus means the greatest of the 3, or the thrice greatest. Hermes Trismegistus is a combination of 3 gods: Thoth, the Egyptian Thoth, the Greek Hermes, and the Roman Mercury. The full name of the god is Thoth Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, the greatest of the 3. So he's a combination of those 3 gods. He's usually considered the god of magic, the god of wisdom. It's the wizard archetype. I mean, my goodness gracious, if you want to look at this character in movies, Hermes Trismegistus is Gandalf the Grey in Lord of the Rings, Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, Yoda in Empire Strikes Back, certainly Albus Dumbledore in the Harry Potter movies. I mean, it's the old Greybeard character. And he is the character in Masonic lore who restores the 7 liberal arts and sciences. So not only do you have in this Masonic ritual the restoration of the Tetragrammaton, it's what comes with it. It's the restoration of wisdom. It makes the candidate a symbolic Pythagoras or Hermes character, giving him this divine warrant to rule over other people. And if you pay attention to this in film, not to get too off topic, but I mean, when you get a filmmaker, they'll really do work wonders with this thing. I mean, for example, in the Da Vinci Code, whenever wisdom is needed, the number 13 comes up on the screen. And this is a clear reference to her 13th degree, the restoration of wisdom, knowledge. You need knowledge, it's the number 13. For example, in the Da Vinci Code, when they're going down the elevator, the Mona Lisa, which has the next clue, which is wisdom, is in room 13. In the National Treasure movie, in the second one, when they need information on the Resolute desk, I mean, where is it kept? It's in chapter 13. So the number 13 in a Masonic context is constantly echoing with restoration of wisdom, knowledge. And you get a filmmaker who knows this, they work wonders with it. And it's very well done. These guys are very adroit with it. So the number 13 is very apropos here. I mean, not only do you have 12 houses of the zodiac ruled by the sun, you know, you look at the back of the $1 bill, you'll have the number 13 all over the place. You can tie into, this is something I'm talking about in my new book titled Freemasonry and the Path to Babylon. I mean, whoever put this together really knew what they were doing. I mean, you even have a 13th hidden zodiac known as Ophiuchus. The serpent bearer, and of course in mythology the serpent is the symbol for wisdom of all things. So this ties into a lot of mythology, but you know, when you really begin to get the symbolic eye, at least Masonically, you'll see this number 13 turning up, and it ties into this whole Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, the restoration of wisdom, the restoration of knowledge, the possession of the name of God, Kabbalah, divinity, the investiture, I don't think that's a word, the investment, that's probably the better word, Kabbalah, the Shekinah, the divine presence.
The Shekinah. Are you referring to Shekinah, the goddess Shekinah?
Well, it's also part of Hebrew Kabbalah, the divine feminine, the divine godly aspect of Kabbalah. This all ties into this. I get into this in much more in depth in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. But if you got the wrap up on this, I don't want to belabor it too long. If you got the symbolic eye, at least in a Masonic context, the number 13 is constantly popping up, and it refers to this high degree Masonic ceremonial. Nothing could be truer when you're getting into the Great Seal, the obverse and reverse of the United States of America.
That's very interesting because, as people mentioned in the chat, 12 apostles and Jesus makes 13. What was coming to mind as you were speaking was, of course, Friday the 13th and the Templars being assassinated on that particular day, that particular day being immortalized as a bad luck because of it. And I wonder if the Catholic Church specifically did that on the 13th for that very reason. We talk about Satanism, and true Satanism is the reversal of something good into evil. So you take something like a number 13, which is a symbol of the divine, for example, to the Knights Templar, and murder them all on that day to reverse it and turn it into something evil. Your thoughts on that?
It's certainly possible. The Friday the 13th, fascinating date to pick. You almost, I don't disagree with what you're saying about reversing stuff. Seems right. I agree with you. You have the cornerstone laying of the White House on Friday the 13th, maybe trying to reverse that as well. And then you also have the laying of the cornerstone of the Supreme Court building on October 13th. Of course, that's a little different contextually. That has to do with the sign of Libra, the drawing down of the House of Libra to your Supreme Court building, investing the building with the judicial scales in the sky. When you're dealing with symbolism, you can always look at it as something being taken positively, reversing it for a different reason. But again, I would always stress to the viewer, try to, and it's hard to do. It's not easy, because something in one context could mean something completely different in another.
That's
Try
true.
to pay attention to the surrounding circumstances, because you can get a different interpretation. And I know I've said this on the show before. You can definitely, when you're dealing with symbolism, you're dealing with multi layers of it.
Yeah, that is very true. And I think that's one of the big problems. One thing that I wouldn't agree with, and maybe you can help clear this up, is that the Eye of Providence is the Eye of Horus. The two don't look anything similar. The Eye of Providence goes back to Christianity, from what I can tell. I don't think it ever appeared in Egypt or going back there. I don't know if you've looked at the symbolism between the brain and the eye of Horus, but when you split the brain open, you get an eye of Horus, and the thalamus is actually the eye, which is right next to the pineal gland, and you've got the whole stem going around just like the eye of Horus. But then you have the eye of Providence, which I think is something distinctively different. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you could. I've always viewed them as the same personally, because a lot of the Christian, the Christian symbolism comes out of the Egyptian. So for them to borrow that would not surprise me at all, because a lot of the Christian symbolism comes out of the Egyptian, and of course we're dealing with solar symbolism ultimately. Um, but I've always heard it just in my travels and researching it, called the Eye of Providence, which really is a comparative symbol going back to the Eye of Horus, which is again a symbol for divinity. The Eye of Horus was contextually it was the same thing in the Egyptian motif. It was a symbol for a divinity, just as it is within the Christian motif, and I might add in the Masonic motif. That was my understanding of it.
Fascinating. I mean, you're really helping me to tie a lot of pieces together, especially around the number 13, because I didn't realize that 13 was such an important number. And like I said, we traveled through 13 different dimensions when we did our ritual in the Great Pyramid, and that was the first understanding that there was 13, that there was more, that there was something to it. And the area that we reached was a very, I guess, divine, for lack of a better term, area that was actually outside of the 12 dimensions of the construct. And when we came back, there was just no describing this place. I mean, it's beyond words, but it's just tying everything all in together.
Right. If you want, I mean, like I said, I won't go too off topic, but this is just a fascinating study of this. When you're getting into Hermes Trismegistus, the wizard character, like I said, this is the figure who goes down to the subterranean vault, pronounces the name of God correctly, and restores the 7 liberal arts and sciences back to mankind. This is the 13th degree in the Scottish Rite, and it's the 7th degree in the York Rite. The York Rite, they call it the Royal Arch of Zorobabel, or the Holy Royal Arch. In the Scottish Rite, it's called the Royal Arch of Enoch or Solomon. And Hermes Trismegistus is the wizard archetype. He runs around with something called the Emerald Tablet, from which all alchemy stems. This is as above, so below. And like I said, if you look at this character in film, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's Albus Dumbledore. Believe it or not, you go to the first Harry Potter movie, and we have the Hermes Trismegistus archetype as Albus Dumbledore. Well, think back to that movie. I mean, you want to see Masonic symbolism done correctly in a film. Go back to the beginning of the first Harry Potter movie. Albus Dumbledore as Hermes Trismegistus, what does he have? Well, he has a subterranean vault beneath Gringotts, of course. Of course, he's Hermes Trismegistus. He's the god of Freemasonry. He's the restorer of the lost, wisdom. And what's he keep in the subterranean vault? The Philosopher's Stone, alchemy. It's from the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus that all alchemy arrives. So, of course, Albus Dumbledore as Hermes Trismegistus has the Philosopher's Stone, naturally.
So
hang on.
Okay.
You got to let me get this in, because this is just too crazy. And like I said, the ritual in the ceremonial in the York Rite is the 7th, and in the Scottish Rite it's the 13th. So what's Albus Dumbledore's vault number? I mean, 713, of course. It's Freemasonry. So you can't make that stuff up. I mean, and whoever is putting this together, that's not a coincidence. These guys are pure experts at what they're doing, and it's it's fascinating to the lengths these guys understand this stuff, and we'll put it in film.
You mentioned the subterranean vault, and that again
Yes.
has a lot of symbolism, because when we did our ritual in the Great Pyramid, first we went down to the subterranean chamber, then we went into the Queen's chamber, then we actually did the ritual in the King's chamber. I realized it wouldn't work unless we hit all 3 chambers. Where was this subterranean chamber? Can you, or the subterranean vault? Is there a location, and is the Great Pyramid modeled after any of this? And I have to ask you, if there's a subterranean vault, is there any symbolism that could correlate to the Queen's chamber within the Great Pyramid and the King's chamber? Because I'm making a correlation in my mind here between the subterranean chamber of the Great Pyramid and the subterranean vault that you're speaking of.
Right. In the Masonic ritual, it's not in Egypt. The subterranean vault is on the Holy Ground, the Temple Mount. They are building the second temple of Zorobabel on the Temple Mount. Jewish stoneworkers are building the second temple, and they discover a trap door in the ground. And they spring open the trap door, and beneath 9 arches is treasure, is Masonic treasure. Underneath these 9 arches. You go down through the 9 arches, you pass through them, you descend into this vault. Underneath the 9 arches is the name of God, light, wisdom. And it's through the correct pronunciation of God, the Tetragrammaton, that the restoration on these pillars is possible. And like I said, by the candidate in the Masonic ritual, by beholding the Tetragrammaton, he becomes a divine, godlike figure. And again, just to reiterate, this is the name of God that's pronounced in the vault by Pythagoras and Hermes to restore mathematics and the 7 liberal arts and sciences back to mankind. If you wish to see this somewhat reversed in literature and cinema or popular culture, take a look at the Alighieri, the Inferno. Right, there's 9 levels of hell, and the bottom level is Lucifer, light. The light bearer. Even Albert Pike gets into this in Morals and Dogma. He says, well, this is this Gnostic reversal that Alighieri is playing around with. You descend through the 9 levels of hell to receive light, to receive wisdom. Just as echoing the Masonic ritual, you go down through these 9 levels, pass through 9 arches to receive light, wisdom. And even in the Divine Comedy, they ascend on the back of Lucifer towards the light to get out of the Inferno. And what Albert Pike suggests is that this is a total Gnostic reversal, that Inferno is paradise and paradise is Inferno. And this ties into the whole Book of Enoch motif, where the angels, the fallen angels, the watchers, are the good guys trying to help mankind with the wisdom, and the God of mankind, this is what would be akin to the demiurge within Gnosticism, is the villain. And again, you'll find this in cinema, The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp. I mean, you pass through 9 gates to receive the wisdom. So this whole motif of the 9 arches, again, the subterranean vault is on the holy ground. What one should come away with all this, and what I kind of, when I was researching this and writing the Royal Arch of Enoch book, is what you should come away with this is this ritual trying to convey some sort of lost yet legitimate history. And why I say that, and why I say that very confidently, is if you look at the early workings of the ritual, as it is now, the subterranean vault is discovered by Jewish temple builders. That's not the way it was in the original ritual. The very early workings of it was discovered by Knights Templar. The Knights Templar discovered the subterranean holy vault on the holy ground. Excuse me, and you start looking at this ritual, and you start sitting back and scratching your head, saying, "Wait a minute. Is this ritual trying to tell me some sort of lost yet legitimate history? Is this more than a ritual coming out of just fantasy or based on the Bible? Is this ritual trying to reenact some legitimate lost history, that the Templars actually discovered something on the Temple Mount, in this subterranean vault? And is this ritual, the product of that, trying to convey this, hidden history almost?" That's what one should really come away with out of all this, because of the intense and vast amounts of symbolism and importance that is ascribed to this ritual. You begin to, at least I have at any rate, sit back and just begin to ask yourself: is this ritual more than just a ritual? Is this trying to convey some sort of lost yet legitimate history, that that this is what the Templars may have discovered on the Temple Mount, some sort of Kabbalistic wisdom or something to that effect? I think that's really the important question to ask.
Well, I do have to ask you. So I don't know if you can see this on the screen, but this is a map of what's known in the Great Pyramid. So you enter from this area here, go all the way down this descending passageway into the subterranean chamber. You go right here, which is the Queen's Chamber, and then you go up the Grand Gallery into the King's Chamber. So in regards to the temple in the Holy Land, is there an area that would be the same as the Queen's Chamber area? And if so, what would that area be?
My answer would be no. I would not see any parallels between the Egyptian and this ritual necessarily, other than you do have some solar symbolism again, echoing it. The subterranean vault is just in the ground. It's a hole in the ground, essentially, and it's sprung through a key stone. The symbol of which of that is intense. We won't have time to get into that. That I get into in the book a little bit more. But that again, that's another solar symbol. But it's essentially a subterranean vault concealed in the ground. There's no template regarding the pyramid or anything like that. I will just end on this point with the ritual again and the location of the subterranean treasure vault. On the holy ground, and I'll just end with this. And I'm sure I've said this on the show before, but I'll say it again. If you're not a Freemason, and you want to watch this ritual on screen, watch the first National Treasure movie. The first National Treasure movie with Nicolas Cage is the Royal Arch of Enoch ritual, literally put on celluloid, quite literally. It's the restoration or recovery of the Masonic treasure, and where else but in a subterranean treasure vault beneath the Holy Ground. In the movie, they moved the Holy Ground to New York Trinity Church, and that's a clear reference to DeWitt Clinton, who was a former mayor of New York City and governor of New York State, who was instrumental in Royal Arch Freemasonry. So if you ever want to watch the ritual, go take a look at the National Treasure movie. That's the ritual put on the big screen.
Fascinating. So I want to ask you about the 7 liberal arts. People are asking in the chat. I do want to say this before we get to that. I realized that I'd actually been studying these the entire time. I mean, going all the way back to 2010,
Sure.
we called it the trivium and the quadrivium.
Right,
And
that's
then
right.
it appears in the second degree of Freemasonry as well as logic, grammar, rhetoric, music, mathematics, and 2 others. I don't remember off the top of my head. But can you go into those?
Well, that's right. That's absolutely correct, Chris. In the second degree, you are encouraged to study the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and this again ties into the high degree ceremonial, or the restoration of the 7 liberal arts and sciences. So, in the second degree ritual, you are taught to better yourself by studying the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and these are decidedly Masonic, because they are coming out of this high degree. The restoration of them is through this. You're even told, I believe it's in one of the Masonic monitors, the Masonry itself comes out of the 7 liberal arts and sciences. So by studying them, you're bettering yourself as a Mason, and of course, if you can easily see the nexus here. If you're told to study the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and Masonry comes out of the 7 liberal arts and sciences, who restored the 7 liberal arts and sciences back to mankind? That's Hermes Trismegistus, making him the sort of default godfather of all Freemasonry. He's also known as Hermes the philosopher. You'll hear that term thrown around a little bit as well. So yeah, I mean, the whole idea of the 7 liberal arts and sciences, Hermes Trismegistus, this is all pure Freemasonry.
Wow. That is amazing, because we talked about it in the context of the importance of understanding, first of all, grammar, logic, rhetoric, because they use logical fallacies, appeal to emotion, so on and so forth, in the media 24 hours a day. And without understanding grammar, logic, and rhetoric, you can be easily controlled and easily manipulated. Now, the trivium and quadrivium were a study, a medieval study that they don't teach anymore. They might teach it in Ivy League schools, but that's about it. But I guarantee you, all politicians, people that are public speakers, they know the trivium, they know the quadrivium, and they have an understanding, and this is how they control people's minds. So it's pretty amazing that you enter Freemasonry, and the first thing they teach you is how to break free of that mind control by understanding logic, grammar, and rhetoric.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, I think the one thing Freemasonry definitely tries to teach is independent thought. Think for yourself. Be your own person. And I think this is again what is ultimately being taught in the 3rd degree ritual. With the death and resurrection, that now you're reborn, you've been given moral instruction, and it helps you go out and be a better person. So yeah, I don't disagree with that analysis at all. And you're absolutely correct. You're brought into the Holy of Holies, at least symbolically. and instructed or encouraged to study the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and that's absolutely correct, to make yourself a better person, to make yourself a more worldly person, and like you said, to ultimately be able to think for yourself. I do not disagree with that.
Well, I'm thinking about now the symbolism on the back of the dollar bill. You have the pyramid with the all-seeing eye on top of it. Now we have a subterranean vault that you're talking about. What is the correlation with the pyramid in regards to Freemasonry? I mean, does that just go back to Osirian legends? Is that where the pyramid with the all-seeing eye on top of it comes from? I would think that there's a
Right.
correlation between the subterranean vault and the subterranean chamber, in the sense that one was modeled after another. Be it the Great Pyramid was modeled after the temple, or the temple was modeled after the Great Pyramid. Probably the temple modeled after the Great Pyramid, but I've got to see a map of the temple in order to fully understand where this vault is and all of that.
Right, right. The vault. Well, for starters, we don't know if this vault exists. This is just legend and lore. In the Masonic literature, it's built by Enoch, and this is after he comes back from his travels. He returns in the Masonic literature to build this vault. And the reason he does this, and this you'll find in Masonic monitors, is, well, why did he do this? Is he wanted to thwart God. He wanted to trick God. God was going to eradicate mankind, and with it, this wisdom from the face of the earth with the flood. So Enoch was going to outwit God, which he did. He concealed the 7 liberal arts and sciences for mankind in the subterranean vault to survive the flood of Noah, which it eventually did. And this gets into the whole idea of, is the God really God? Is it the demiurge? Is it a Gnostic demiurge? That's a whole nother debate. Um, the Within Masonic lore, there is loads of references to Egypt. So tying it into the pyramid, I mean, you get into the whole idea of Masons being, civil engineers, city planners, city builders. I mean, what's one of the greatest architectural feats of mankind? The pyramids. So naturally, the Masons lay claim to this in some form or fashion. I mean, you'll find this in numerous Masonic monitors of the Masons. This is perfected architecture with the pyramid. And this, of course, the architectural secrets that were used to build the pyramids were later used to build the Gothic cathedrals in throughout Europe. This is, you'll find this in lots of the Masonic monitors. You'll find this in Anderson's constitutions. So, when you're dealing with Egypt, when you're getting into the ritual, you'll definitely see these Egyptian solar motifs that are clearly being borrowed. The whole idea of what is really best described as, the dying and resurrected solar god man. I can't think of any other, thing to call this character. Like I said before, you can call this Hiram Abiff, you can call him Osiris, you can call it Jesus Christ, you can call him, Harry Potter, or Neo Anderson. I mean, it's pretty much all the same thing. It's the whole idea of the resurrected solar being, as it were. But when you're getting onto the whole idea with Egypt and the pyramid, I mean, there were nexuses in the early days of the founding of the nation, with the United States being this new superpower, being sort of the new Egypt. Like I said, within Masonry, which was instrumental in the founding. You'll find numerous Egyptian references. We've talked about many of them already. So to find them using a pyramid, it should not be surprising. Again, it's an architectural wonder. The Masons are, after all, architects. And you get into the whole Osirian legend. As far as the whole thing with the subterranean vault goes, I mean, you can find it. I guess the best way I could describe, if you want to try to form a nexus. I mean, you could do a comparative study of it, where you have the subterranean vault on the, Temple Mount built by Enoch. You have a subterranean chamber in the pyramids. I mean, there are loads of, comparative studies that equate Enoch with Thoth, this Egyptian god of wisdom. So you could kind of find that as well. From a comparative religion study, I suppose. But the subterranean vault in the ritual, other than having some solar references, I really can't think of anything relating to Egypt, other than like I said, this god Hermes Trismegistus, who does come out of Hellenistic Egypt, who does restore the seven liberal arts and sciences. I mean, I guess you could make a comparative study also, or I guess you make a fair comparison saying the Egyptian pyramid has a subterranean vault. This has a subterranean vault. There are Egyptian motifs. I mean, I'll go for that. Sure, why not? But as far as the pyramid, like I said on the on the seal, you're getting into the architecture of Egypt, which is lauded within Freemasonry and a lot of Masonic monitors. And again, the number 13 appearing, that is clearly coming out of the Rite of Perfection and the Scottish Rite as the Tetragrammaton, the recovery of divinity, investing the seal with the divine presence. So yeah, that would be sort of my explanation of it.
Wow. Um, there seems to be a correlation to Egypt for sure, and
Oh, no doubt.
there also seems to be the continuation of the Egyptian mystery schools is essentially what I look at Freemasonry as. I think maybe it's not that anymore, but at least at one point it was supposed to be. I know when I went to Egypt after really understanding Masonry from reading your books and having you on several times and doing independent research as well. I found a lot of correlations. For instance, the way Freemasons pray with their hands like this. And this is the position of the pharaohs. The pharaohs holding an ankh and a was in ankh in one hand and was in the other hand. You see the pharaohs with their left foot forward, and I know the left foot forward comes out in Masonry a lot. There was one pharaohess, and we talked about this off air, and I don't know if you can touch upon this, but all the pharaohs seem to have their left foot forward. However, at the Temple of Hatshepsut, she was a female pharaohess, the first female pharaohess. She was the regent of her nephew until he turned 18, but she continued to stay in power. She was allowed into the Holy of Holies with the priests. She unified Egypt. She made fair trade deals with literally all the neighboring countries. Everybody loved her during her reign. But she's seen with her right foot forward. And the first thing that comes to mind is left-hand path and right-hand path, but I don't think it's as simple as that. Can you illuminate us at all on this mystery? Because I haven't been able to figure it out.
Well, I mean, I would just say I'm not familiar with the temple or the engravings or the sculptures or anything like that. What I would say is, when you're getting into, masonry, I mean, I agree with you 100%. It definitely has a lot of, um, Egyptian elements in it. I mean, that's irrefutable, but it also has a lot of, other elements as well. Um, and that's one of the things that fascinates me with masonry is how much it covers. It spans so much. I mean, it has Egyptian mystery schools, solar, you get into the mysteries of Eleusis, Mithraism, Christianity, Judaism. I mean, believe it or not, the closest thing that Freemasonry resembles on its face is Islam. Um, I mean, in Islam, there's Sufism, which is mystical Islam. This is really more the Sunnis than the Shiites. That's the closest thing that Freemasonry actually resembles is Islam, believe it or not. But you'll find one of the things that I really like about Masonry is it incorporates all these different traditions and elements, the mystery schools, Egypt. There's a book you should take a look at. If I have it here in my library, it's been a while since I've looked at it. It's written by Manly P. Hall, and it's literally called The Freemasonry of the Ancient Egyptians. And he gets into a lot of the stuff you're talking about, with the pyramids and with the Osirian cycle and things like that. When you're getting into the rituals, I'm not familiar with the Egyptian pharaoh that you're talking about, so I'm going to hold back on making a comment on it. But when you're interpreting the Masonic ritual, at least in the third degree, I mean, you're absolutely, correct. We talked about this with Osiris being resurrected. I mean, you can look at it from a Christian standpoint and say, Hiram Abiff is a Christ analog. The death and resurrection, the betrayal, by the three fellow crafts, is analogous to the betrayal of Peter. It ties into a lot of these mystery traditions. But, Christianity, Judaism with the building of the temples, Islam with Sufism, like, for example, I mean, just so the viewers are a little bit know, like Sufism teaches morality through the use of symbols. There's non-solicitation of members. They have a hieromatic martyr as well. I forget his name, but there's a lot of deep comparisons with Sufism and Freemasonry. One of the more fascinating ones, and I buy into it 100%, And this was comes out of 17th century England. And of course, Masonry came together in 1717. That the third degree ritual is the English Civil War. And I think this one was absolutely correct, because when you look at the high degree ceremonials, where Hiram Abiff is Charles I, and the martyrs, the ruffians who kill him are Oliver Cromwell, Henry Ireton, and the regicides, and the resurrection of Hiram is the restoration of the Stuarts back to the throne of England. And then you could say, well, the recovery of the Tetragrammaton in the high degree ceremonials, which was actually crafted by the Society of Jesus, is the restoration symbolically of the Stuart Catholics back to the throne of England, which is what the whole modus operandi of the high degrees originally were. So there's numerous interpretations of the ritual, and I think that a lot of them, some of them I don't agree with, but I definitely agree with the Egyptian one. I definitely agree with the Osirian mythology. But like I said, you could look at it through a Christian prism and say, oh, it's Jesus. And you could certainly look at it as a retelling of the English Civil War. That one's fascinating. Lots of interesting conspiracy going on with that one. But maybe for another day.
Fascinating. I think people in the chat room may have cracked this. They said it may have to do with the brain. The left brain is the logical. It's the masculine side of the brain. The right brain is the feminine side of the brain. So the feminine, Hatshepsut, who was a female, has her right foot forward for that reason. The other pharaohs had the left foot forward. So bravo, guys and gals in the chat. Robert, give us your websites and where people can find the books and things like that. I want to take another quick break here in a few minutes, but plug all that, please.
Right. Well, first off, let me say thank you for Chris for having me on Beyond the Veil. I certainly hope Sherry feels better. I know we've scheduled one for January, so hopefully she'll be with us in that one. Yeah, I mean, tell her get well soon from me. If you're interested in what I'm talking about, and you're interested in my books, I have 4 books out right now. You can get them in the print edition or the ebook. The easiest place to find me is my website. My website is my name. My name is Robert W Sullivan IV, and that is exactly my website. It's www.robertwsullivan.iv, the letter I, the letter V for the fourth.com, robertwsullivan.iv.com. There's links there to buy the books. Like I said, they're sold on all the major online retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. You can get the ebook, you can get the print edition. I have 4 books out. The one book on Freemasonry, which is called The Royal Arch of Enoch. I have 2 books on esoteric movie symbolism. And I also have a work of fiction out called A Pact with the Devil. So if you're into gothic, erotic murder mysteries, you want to check that one out. But 4 books are out. And like I said, go to my website, www.robertwsullivan.iv.com. Links there to follow me on social media, all my events and appearances, my podcasts, all that's updated routinely. The site is not dormant. Believe me, I am constantly updating it with events, appearances. I have a blog and news, which my appearances always wind up appearing on. Any sort of event or anything like that I have going on, that's constantly updated. Links to buy the books, and again, you can get them in the print edition or the ebook, whatever you choose. www.robertwsullivan.iv.com.
I see an eye of Horus on your page right there. I don't know if you see it on the screen, but I think that's Masonic symbolism.
What's it with the? I'm going to have to go there real quick. I'm trying to picture it in my head. Yeah. Which one where is it?
That's our logo. That's the Beyond the Veil. Yeah, I'm showing your website here on the screen.
That's my blog you're looking at right there. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Pact with the Devil.
Right. That's my first work of fiction. That came out about a year ago. I'll give everyone a brief update with what's been going on. I actually am working on 4 books at once. A Pact with the Devil was released in December of last year. The print edition, the ebook came out. As it is with all books, there was a little bit of errata that escaped me that slipped through. That was corrected in February. And over the summer, I decided to take a bit of a break, a bit of an extended vacation. I went through my other 3 books, and I basically made some edits on them, some very minor things. And I'm going through the process right now of bringing the 2 cinema books and the Royal Arch of Enoch. There'll be some edits coming to them, minor stuff, a little punctuation, a couple typos that slip through. Those are being corrected right now. Those will probably take effect in the next couple months. So over the summer, I just took a vacation, bit of a working vacation, just to go back through those 3 books and just make some corrections to the some minor fixes to them. If you have the books or you want to buy them now, go right ahead. Like I said, there's no pages missing or paragraphs inserted upside down or misspellings every other word or anything. Just a minor couple typos, a couple things punctually I had to fix. So that's what I did over the summer, and I'm going through right now and having them done. But those 4 books are out. You can get them right now, and I'm currently working on 4 books at once. Pretty much 2 have taken center stage. I'm working on Cinema Symbolism 3 right now, and I'm also working on another work of fiction with Pact with the Devil. I'm working on a sequel to it, but I'm also working on a series of novels, stories that deal with some of the backstories of the characters I present in that one. That's really been fun to write. So I'm working on those two. Those 2 are sort of taking center stage right now. So I'm doing Cinema Symbolism 3 and another work of fiction. And my plan is to try to get them out at the same time. Probably, to be honest, though, probably at least 1.5 years, 2 years away. But like I said, you can get Royal Arch, Cinema Symbolism 2, and Pact with the Devil. They're available right now in print edition or the ebook.
Excellent. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, let's take another quick break. We'll be right back in 2 minutes, and we'll pick it back up with Masonic symbolism, cinema symbolism, and much, much more right here on Beyond the Veil.
Here, everything is decided here. You cannot comprehend the magnitude, the rapture, and the tragedy of this moment. And yet you must. This is the sublime moment of our undoing, the ineffable fulcrum upon which swings the entirety of our history. You must understand, our presence here doesn't alter history. You and I meet here because we are compelled to. We have always met here. We are merely passengers on the wheel of destiny, describing a perfect circle to this point. I've seen the beginning and the end of our story, however, and the tale is crude and ill-conceived. We must rewrite the ending of it. You and I. What you feel is the pull of history rushing to meet us. This is where history and destiny collide. We're hurtling towards our destinies. Even now, the time stream strains to divert itself. The future is reshuffling itself to accommodate your monumental decision. This is where we restore ourselves. This is where we reclaim our intended destinies. It's all laid out for you here. I'll not ask you to trust me. Your truths are for you to discover alone. There's a third option. A monumental secret hidden in your very presence here. But it's a secret you have to discover for yourself. Unearth your destiny. It's all laid out for you here.
My dear traveler, the purpose of raw consciousness is never to destroy. It is always to create. Build bridges. Create happiness. And bring forth new life. We must live in the hope that mankind will draw together. And that we better understand each other. The more that we awaken, the easier this will become. Now rise. Follow your conductors. And fear no danger. As you step beyond the veil.
All right, fascinating discussion we're having, and for those of you just joining us, the little twin is not feeling well, so we have the owl taking her place on screen this evening. I don't know if she's watching. If she's watching, she'll get a kick out of that. But Robert W. Sullivan IV is our guest. We've touched upon everything from the secrets of Freemasonry, the secrets, arts, parts, and points of Freemasonry, and several other things that the Royal Arch of Enoch and cinema symbolism. I want to get into the Mandela effect because it's something that Robert and I have been talking about off air, and I think it's something he started looking into about just recently, about a year or two ago, if I remember correctly. But there have been some very strange Mandela effects, especially since Robert is very familiar with these films. I mean, Luke, I Am Your Father doesn't exist in this timeline. Which is the other one? Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, that doesn't exist in this timeline either, and that's the most famous one of all. So, Robert, take us away on Mandela effects. What are your thoughts, and what have you been noticing?
Right, right. When I first started hearing about this, to be brutally honest with you, I thought it was total BS. Um, and some of them, like the way it should be, I remember them that way. Like the one you just mentioned with Empire Strikes Back. I remember it the way it is, where he says, "No, I'm your father." I don't know where the Luke, I'm your father ever got started was, but the mirror, mirror on the wall is definitely a strange one. But there's one that really, like I said, when I was looking at them, a lot of them I remember the way that they say they should be. But people will say, well, maybe you're from another dimension or something like that. But there's one that I cannot reconcile at all. And I know I heard this. And I know this because this has been parodied in numerous movies and television shows. And like when I first heard about it, I mean, I was like, this has to be a joke because I know this happened. I know this happened. And I'm 47, and this I believe happened in the 70s. And like I said, it was just one that just I was like, no, this isn't right. I mean, I remember this happening. I remember this. I saw videotape of it. I've seen this happen. And this is, of course, arguably one of the most famous lines in Oscar speeches of all time, which is when she won Best Picture, Sally Field. And I believe in somewhere in the 70s, she won Best Picture. I forget the name of the movie, Norma Ray, it may have been. And she got up on stage and she was holding the Oscar and she was saying, and of course, everyone knows the line, "You like me, you really like me," right?
Mm-hmm.
Only she never said it.
Right.
I mean, I remember watching video of her saying this. And I can't reconcile it. I don't know how this changed or, I mean, I remember in numerous movies where this has been made fun of. Where someone will say, "Oh, you like me, you really like me." I mean, this is on The Simpsons. This is in the movie with Jim Carrey, The Mask, where they hand him the statue. He says, "Oh, you like me, you really like
Mm-hmm.
me." Only it doesn't exist. And I don't know how this got changed or, who changed it or, I mean, and I actually remember watching a videotape of the Oscars where she said it.
Well,
And now it
let me
doesn't
share
exist.
an experience with you. So when the Force Awakens came out, Cherie had never seen Star Wars before. So obviously, before we watched that one, we needed to sit down and watch the first three. Growing up, I had a set of sheets, and I remember my parents putting this on the bed all the time with C-3PO and R2-D2 on it. And C-3PO has always been gold. So we're watching the films, all three of them in a row. Everything's fine. We watch A Force Awakens, and then the Mandela effect of C-3PO's leg turning silver happened about 4 or 5 weeks after that. And I thought to myself, we just watched these films. He was gold. He never had a silver leg. Now you go back to the toys and things like that, and you see the toys have silver legs. Nobody's ever talked about the silver leg. This is in A New Hope, opening scene of A New Hope.
Yeah. What the thing with C-3PO with the silver leg, that's one like I can't remember it either way. If you told me it was all gold, but I seem to have a remembrance of the silver leg, but I think it was like in advertising. I don't think it was in the movie. So, it's weird like how people have different like recollections of this. I remember seeing the silver leg on like advertising, but it wasn't in the movie. But then there's people like you who never don't have any recollection of it at all. So yeah, it's definitely strange. I can't figure out the Sally Field one because I know I saw a videotape of that. I mean, of her saying that, and I know that's been parodied in movies all over the place. So yeah, I don't really understand it. And I know she said that at some point. So people seem to have these different memories, and like I said, they're not uniform. Like I said, I have a memory of the advertising at some point when I was a kid of Start with the Silver Leg, but some people don't remember it. But I don't ever think it was in the movie. It was just like on advertising. So who knows? It's definitely weird though.
Well, the actor that played C-3PO, he came out and said, yeah, it's C-3PO's always had a silver leg. However, the guy that did all of the photography for the marketing of A New Hope, he posted on Twitter and said C-3PO never had a silver leg. If he did, I would have adjusted my lights accordingly to compensate for the silver leg and the reflection of the silver leg. He says, I photographed C-3PO many, many times. He never had a silver leg.
Yeah, it's that's what makes it so strange is certain people remember it a certain way and other people don't. Are you familiar with the Beatle lyric that everyone that seems to have changed from Sergeant Pepper?
There were a few Beatle ones that I remember, and what I found out with at least one, and I don't remember which one it was off the top of my head, but there were actually two versions of the song recorded that had the two different lyrics, so people were legitimately hearing that. But I'm not familiar with the Sergeant Pepper one, unless this is the same one I'm thinking. But I've never really been a Beatles fan.
Right. It was the song. It's the second song on Sergeant Pepper called "Get By with a Little Help from My Friends." The way most people remember it is what would you do if I sang out of tune? Would you get up and walk out of me, or walk out of me? It's an action.
Right.
It's apparently says the lyric is what would you do? What would you if it's something? If I what would you do? I can't remember what it is now, but apparently it changed, or some people have different memories of it now.
I think that's the one I'm thinking of that actually has two different versions that were recorded.
Two versions of it.
Yeah. So there was.
that might explain that one.
However, there was that. Who sings that? We Are the Champions. Queen. We are the champions of the world. Of the world doesn't exist anymore. And they have a video. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's George Clooney and several other celebrities. They're riding in a car singing it, and they all go to sing In the World at the end, and it's not there anymore. The song just ends on We Are the Champions.
I don't understand it. What's going on?
From the best that I can gather, it seems to be some kind of timeline manipulation. Now, obviously, nobody's going back specifically to change Berenstain to Berenstein or Berenstein to Berenstain. But I think they're altering events in the past, which is creating these residuals that we're kind of picking up on. So it's unintended small changes like that. What's interesting about Berenstein Bears is that we went to the Wayback Machine. And there was a website called 80scartoons.net, and they listed it as Berenstein, Stein, all the way until 2002. And then all of a sudden it changed in the web archives, and it's still there. Still on their website, it's listed, the URL is 80scartoons.net/Berenstein.html. So we did a little bit more research. We found the trademark attorney. And now you would imagine that the trademark attorney of all people would remember the exact spelling because that's what he does for a living. He printed several books that say Berenstein Bears, and it was Berenstein on his website up until about 2 years ago, and then he went back and changed it about 2 years ago. But you still find that profile, which was copied off his website, and it still says Berenstein on other places. And this guy did Ninja Turtles. This guy did several cartoon characters, and he was like the trademark attorney for all of these Hollywood companies. So you'd imagine he could spell Berenstain if it was Berenstain indeed.
Right. I don't understand. Yeah, it's crazy. It's just crazy, some of them. I mean, like I said, the Sally Field one, I cannot reconcile that one. I mean, you've got me, I cannot, you got me on that one. I cannot explain that one at all. But like the Luke Skywalker one in Empire, I remember it from the way it's supposed to be, where he says, "No, I'm your father." I remember that. But it's weird that some people remember it certain ways, but not others, and that's what makes it.
Well, James Earl Jones, he quoted that several times in different interviews, and he says, "Luke, I am your father." He said, "When I first read the dialogue, 'Luke, I am your father,' I thought, he must be lying. How are they going to play
Right.
this lie out? And then you have the one from Forrest Gump. Life was like a box of chocolates, and everybody's been quoting it as life is like a box of chocolates, and then it's
Right.
changed to life was. There was a SNL skit where Tom Hanks was reenacting his scenes, and he says life is like a box of chocolates. So Tom Hanks remembers it as life is like a box of chocolates.
Right, and that makes more sense
Mm-hmm.
because it's active, not passive.
Right.
Uh, and what was the other one? The Anne Rice one. I always thought it was Interview with a Vampire,
Right.
right?
Right. Now it's
It's not,
Interview with the Vampire.
with the vampire,
Uh-huh.
and that doesn't make sense. So yeah, I
And
mean,
we're gonna need a bigger boat. Now it's you're gonna need a bigger boat.
you're going to need a bigger boat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I
There's
mean, like you said, it must be some minor time ripple that's being just slightly tweaked of some kind.
well, it's even bigger than that. There's this one about New Zealand. Some people
Oh,
remember.
about it, the island missing. Or
Yes,
whatever.
yes, yes. If you go to Dazed and Confused, it's still in this movie. There's a scene where
I remember this.
yeah, she's spinning the globe, and you can see that little island on the globe when you pause it.
And now
So
it's gone.
it's gone, but
It's gone.
it still exists within the residual of the movie. So okay,
Yeah.
here's another one for you. Houston, we have a problem from Apollo 13. That was uploaded to YouTube, and it changed to Houston, we've had a problem. So you go to the YouTube video and you see the comments, everybody's freaking out going, hey, wait a minute, this was we have a problem. It's changed, it's changed, it's changed. Then it changed back to Houston, we have a problem. But the comments of people hearing Houston, we've had a problem still exist within that YouTube video.
Right.
So it went from we have a problem to we've had a problem back to we have a problem.
I guess it proves that time travel must be occurring because, like you said, these are slight tweaks that, must be going on. Because you can't explain them. I mean, it's the only thing that makes sense. That these little slight tweaks. I mean, I remember the one, this was one that I remember, and maybe I'm wrong, was the box of Raisin Bran. The son always had the sunglasses.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he did. He doesn't have them now?
No, he doesn't have them.
No, he's always had the sunglasses.
No, now they're gone.
I remember that as a kid. We used to see the
That's
Raisin
what I
Bran
remember.
commercials with the 2 scoops and all of that.
Right. The son always had the sunglasses on.
Uh-huh.
Now the sunglasses are gone.
Wow. Monopoly, the Monopoly man with his monocle. He doesn't have a monocle now.
Yeah. I that one I don't remember either way. Now that one there with the Monopoly, I couldn't tell you either way on that one. But I know the Raisin Bran had the sunglasses.
Curious George, tail or no tail?
Yeah, I think it's no tail now.
Yeah, it's no tail now. Which doesn't make sense. A monkey's always going to have a tail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Weird.
Something is going on, for sure.
Yes. Oh, I agree. The one with Sally Field, like I said, you like me, you really like me. That's one of the most iconic lines ever spoken at an Oscar. Go watch the movie with Jim Carrey, The Mask. There's a scene where he's wearing it, and someone hands him a statue, and he does it. He says, "Oh, you like me, you really like me." I mean, this is imitated on The Simpsons. I mean, this has been parodied all over the place. Only it never happened anymore.
That is interesting. The Simpsons is very interesting. I'm sure you've seen some of this where The Simpsons seems to predict the future. They even did an episode where Donald Trump was president.
Well, there's better ones than for Donald Trump than The Simpsons. The Simpsons. Well, there's some really strange things going on. I was looking at this over the summer, and there does seem to be. I was on with someone the other night, Solaris Blue Raven. I was talking about this with her, and she thought this reeked of programming of some kind. And it was that. I'll get into the Donald Trump ones in a minute because there's better ones for Trump than The Simpsons. The one where Simpsons predicted 9/11, where Bart holds the money up in front of the magazine that has the number 9, the World Trade Centers are the number 11. And of course, I think the episode is called Homer Simpson versus New York City, or New York City versus Homer Simpson. What's really interesting about this episode is this came out in 1997. um, uh, years before 9/11. And then 2 years later, you had the Fight Club movie come out with Brad Pitt and Brad Pitt and Ed Norton. Um, and this is one of the seminal movies. This came out in 99 of predicting or foreshadowing 9/11, where you have the destruction of, I mean, my goodness, you have the destruction of the financial buildings at the very end of the movie. Tyler Durden refers to it as Ground Zero. You have the operation in it by the Space Monkeys called Latte Thunder, which is destruction of the corporate art. When you watch the movie, the corporate art is obviously supposed to be the sphere structure at the plaza of the World Trade Center. Um, What's interesting about the Simpsons episode and Fight Club is they were released on the exact same day, 2 years apart, which was September 21st. The Simpsons episode came out on September 21st, 1997. Fight Club was released on September 21st, 1999. And then 2 years after that, you had 9/11 almost to the day, um, almost like it's almost some sort of like synchronized, I call it Jungian synchronicity. I mean, almost like some sort of build up pattern to this thing based on the dates. I thought that was just really interesting, with the date synchronicity of the Fight Club movie and with The Simpsons. The ones with Donald Trump are really fascinating. In 2010, you can go watch this on YouTube. Donald Trump made a television commercial. Yeah, there it is. There's Bart holding up the money in front of the 9/11 icon. That episode was released on September 21st, 1997, 2 years prior to the day of Fight Club coming out, which is one of your all-time predictor movies, foreshadowing movies of 9/11. And then almost 2 years to the day after that, you actually have the actual, grand finale, the actual event. I can't reconcile it. Like I said, it's almost some sort of synchronicity of some kind going on. The Donald Trump ones are really interesting. You can find the video on YouTube. In 2010, Donald Trump made a television commercial for Serta mattresses, and it's a very brief commercial. And he's talking to a sheep, and the whole thing of the advertising is Donald Trump has these mattresses in his hotel room, and you're going to get a good night's sleep, so you don't have to count the sheep anymore. So the sheep are going to be out of work. What are you going to do? And Donald Trump says, "Well, I've got a job for you guys." There it is. And the two sheep standing outside the hotel room are 11 and 9. Of course, November 9th, the year that he
Wow.
won the presidency. There's a better one than that. This carries backwards in time, where Donald Trump turns up in the movie Gremlins 2 in 1990. In that movie, there's a character in it known as Daniel Clamp. He's played by John Glover. It's a clear Donald Trump analog. The guy's a New York real estate developer. He has a building called Clamp Tower. I mean, it's obviously supposed to be Donald Trump. And in the movie, Clamp is coming out of the tower. Two news reporters accost him, having questions for him, and the numbers on their microphone are 11 and 9 again, November 9th. The day he won the presidency. So those are some real screwy ones going on with Donald Trump as well. I find that very interesting. I thought that was so strange and so synchronistic of what Carl Jung said, that I'm actually including that in the third movie book I'm writing, Cinema Symbolism 3. I mean, I just can't reconcile that. I mean, and that's just so weird and strange. Go figure it. What's going on. I mean, it has to be some sort of synchronicity going on. I'm 100% convinced of it.
Wow. That is that's pretty fascinating. The predictions from The Simpsons,
They're never ending.
they are. I mean, they were talking about Ebola. I showed that Curious George and the Ebola virus. This was way before the Ebola scare. And then we just talked about Curious George being a Mandela effect as well. So,
Right.
If we can look at the timeline of The Simpsons here for just a moment, I shudder to think what's coming up after Donald Trump, because they introduce Lisa as the president after Donald Trump. She makes a statement that she takes over after the Trump administration, and Trump has bankrupt the country. Not saying that he's going to bankrupt the country, but if we have a woman president afterwards, I'm concerned that it might be the devil herself.
we'll have to wait and see on that. Hopefully, Trump will be in there for a little while, so maybe we'll have some time to figure that out. I think I can't remember what it was, but I think the Simpsons. You probably know this more than me. I think the Simpsons actually predicted to the score the World Cup one year.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it may have been 14. I think it was. It was the year that Germany won. I think the Simpsons actually predicted that Germany was going to win. I think they had the score of the final, and I think they had them beating the team that they were supposed to beat. So, yeah, I don't know if it's really predictive. I think it's more synchronicity. This is kind of what Carl Jung talked about. Is that this media, because it's an expression of it's a humanistic expression of the human being, the human condition, that is somehow synchronizing to these future events. Um, at first, especially with the stuff with Donald Trump and with the Mandela effect, at first I thought, oh, this can't be, but you see it for your own eyes and you think, oh, no, 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 there's something to this. And especially with that Sally Field Mandela. I mean, I know at some point in time she said that, and why that was changed or how it was changed is beyond me. But I can't figure it out. And like I said, that stuff with Donald Trump, I mean, that's just too weird.
Well, let me throw out a crazy idea. This is insane, but I'm going to follow it up by explaining it. What do you think about the idea that Donald Trump is a time traveler?
No, I don't think he might be per se. I think time travel. I think if Trump was a time traveler, I think he couldn't keep that quiet. I think he would have let that out of the bag. But I think there could be time travelers. I've often heard, even some of the more renowned UFO people talking about maybe UFOs are time travelers. They're not space aliens, but they're people from the future coming back to see what's going on.
So
Um,
let me throw out some more information to you about this. So
Go
his
ahead.
uncle, who he has revered, and he tells him that his uncle, he's made speeches at his uncle, and he's never named him by name, but that his uncle taught him about electricity, taught him about power, taught him all kinds of things. His uncle was John Trump. Now, John Trump was a physicist for the government who was assigned to look over all of Tesla's research and see if there's anything that's usable or viable. And he reported to the government there was nothing. But in Tesla's papers were time travel documentations. Now,
Right.
the theory goes that John Trump actually created one of these machines, and Donald Trump has been using it. And during the campaign, during his campaign, some guy came and rushed the stage with a gun, tried to shoot him. I don't know if you remember this, and claimed to be a time traveler from the future.
No, I remember the guy trying to shoot him, but I don't remember him claiming time travel. But here's one for you. Along those same lines, when we talk about the Sally Field Mandela, do you know where her brother works?
No.
CERN.
Wow. It does not
No,
surprise me. Have you seen the picture of the scientist at CERN that's holding up a sign that says Mandela?
no. But did you see the? This was written off as a hoax, but did you see? Well, you know as well as I do the Shiva statue. Did you see the CERN employees doing the satanic ritual
Yeah.
at the statue?
Yes, I did. I did.
Yeah, I mean
The
that
secret
has to be.
footage.
Yeah, that has to be a hoax, though. I mean, it's clearly CERN, and it must be people who have access to it. But I think that was done for sensationalism. I mean, I don't think that was. Don't you think that?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think they were just trolling the internet.
yeah, yeah.
I, I,
That's
I
what
I
my
do that
impression.
every once in a while. I put out little things and see if anybody will pick up on it. And only
What's the guy with Mandela? What's he supposed to be
he,
like saying that this is where the Mandela effect is coming from?
this is a CERN scientist. This sign right here says we are happy at CERN, and then down here it says Bond One, and then over here it says Mandela.
Weird.
I know.
Yeah,
But maybe that's another troll. Maybe
yeah.
because these guys have to read the internet,
Oh, of
and
course.
I mean, I'm sure you can understand as a Freemason, you read some of the Masonic conspiracies, and you just sit back and laugh. And then I think that might be what they're doing because they read the conspiracies about CERN opening up wormholes and all this stuff, and they might just be riling the internet up a little bit. Or maybe
Oh,
there's
I
something to
agree.
it. I mean, they could just be laughing in our faces.
Oh, I agree. I think that the thing with CERN was just a media stunt, like, sensationalism. I didn't take that seriously, but there is, and like you said with the Masonic stuff. Oh yeah, I mean, even to this day, I get asked. I mean, I don't mind it. I mean, I always believe there's no such thing as a stupid question. So if you ask me the question, I will answer it. But I mean, I still to this day get asked, sometimes, not always, is Freemasonry Satanism? I mean, I would have thought that this would have been totally dispelled by 2018, any notion of this. But, it still seems to linger. I think it's completely ridiculous. But, I guess it's kind of, funny of me saying it with, I got my devil lamp going on behind me.
I was going to ask you about that. I want to say this real quick. We had a caller call in a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to him on air like this, as I normally do. And he did a freeze frame of my hand like this. And he said, that's a Masonic symbol. That means on the level. And you can see that he's doing a Masonic symbol right there. And then they put the Baphomet. I said, hey, all right, have a good one like this. And then he freeze framed that and said, that's the Baphomet symbol right there. So yeah, it's funny how people see something out of absolutely nothing.
Right. Well, like the lamp, it's just the devil. I used it in the, what happened was I bought the thing years ago. My mother and father and myself to a degree collect, antiques, oddities, anything like weird historically. The piece next to it is really strange. But years ago, it was probably in the mid '90s. I was up at an antique show in Massachusetts with them. I just walked into a shop and this devil lamp was sitting there. And I liked it. I thought it was different. A lot of times when you see the devil in artwork, he's comical. This devil's kind of ticked off. I've had the thing for 20 years. It just, kind of sits on a shelf. I plug it in, turn it on from time to time. I've had no paranormal activity with it, no negative vibes come out of it whatsoever. And I will say, when I was writing the Pact with the Devil book, the fiction, I remember thinking to myself, I was getting near the end. I thought, well, I got to do a new about the author photo, and I thought, well, I got to incorporate that lamp somehow into it. And of course, this is now my profile picture all over the place. And I was sitting at the desk. I put the lamp up next to me, and I kind of looked back over my shoulder, and the picture was taken. I remember thinking to myself, well, usually, when I'm doing these about the photo, about the author photo, I usually have to take 10, 12 of them before I, some have red eye, some just look really bad. I have a stupid expression on my face. When I was doing the Royal Arch of Enoch photo or whatever, I go through like 20 takes before, that's the one, we'll use that one. When I did the one for Pact with the Devil, I was sitting at the desk. I had the devil lamp there. I turned. I was holding the quill. The photo was shot, and I looked at it. I thought, oh, no, that's it. That's the photo. I don't have to take any more. That's perfect. And that's the about the author photo. It's all my social media. I have it as my profile picture right now. But no, that's the lamp over my shoulder, just sitting there turned on with the lamp on. It is kind of cool. I think it's a very interesting piece. It's the only one I've ever seen. I date it probably from the 30s or 40s. I believe it's from South America. I believe it's actually marked maybe Mexico or Honduras. I'd have to go look. It's a great piece. I've never seen another one. And like I said, if you want to see it, a better picture of it, take a look at it. Any of my social media. It's my profile picture right now. It's the about the author photo from About the Devil. Now the piece sitting next to it, that's a very, very dark artifact. That's very, very sinister, much more so than the devil lamp. That's probably why I got it sitting next to it.
Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. And if we can talk about it on the other side, I do want to ask you about Pazuzu too, because you mentioned the devil's always looking kind of comical and things like that. Can we keep you for another 20 minutes?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, yeah, let's get more into cinema symbolism and the symbology of the devil as well, because I love this topic here. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen.
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Am I interrupting? Thought you might be running low.
Pour yourself a glass, pal.
Thank you, but I'm afraid it would be wasted on me.
I think we wasted our time coming here, don't you?
Your question depends on me understanding what you hope to achieve by coming here.
What we hope to achieve was to meet our makers, get answers, why they even made us in the first place.
Why do you think your people made me?
We made you because we could.
Can you imagine how disappointing it would be for you to hear the same thing from your creator. May I ask you something?
Please do.
How far would you go to get what you came all this way for? Your answers. What would you be willing to do?
Anything and everything.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth!
These are the fathomless truths. The agony of birth and death and rebirth. This is the wheel of fate, the purifying cycle which sustains all life. I am the hub of the wheel, the origin of all life, the devourer of death.
Or maybe you're just hungry. Could it be as simple as that?
I made you, and I will unmake you if I become so inclined.
Oh, I see you now as you truly are. A cancer. A spooling parasite burrowed deep in the heart of this world.
Play out your pitiful rebellion and take your place among the destroyed, the used, and the damned. But know this, you are mine for eternity.
Your arrogance is boundless. I serve no one.
Fellow traveler, the cries of the mystery speak again, bidding organic consciousness a welcome to the House of Light. The great institution of materialism has failed. The false civilization built by man has turned, like a monster destroying its creator. Science battles itself impotently against the barriers of the unknown. Only your consciousness knows the true path. You, the illuminated, can carry the understanding upwards towards the light. Only your consciousness can teach the children of men to live well, to die well, and in perfect measure, be born again, through the knowledge of virtue, compassion, love, and true understanding, as you are sublimely raised, beyond the veil.
All right, let's wrap it. Let's do a final segment with Robert W. Sullivan, stepping back beyond the veil. We're talking about cinema symbolism, Masonic symbolism, much, much more. We have the Isis in the background. Somebody said that it looked like a crucifix, and you're absolutely right. It does look like a crucifix. They took the Isis symbolism and they turned it into the crucifix. And as Robert said earlier, it's all about the intention of the symbols. And I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a Masonic symbol here doing this. And it's so funny because so many people try to find all this Masonic symbolism in our show, and they miss the actual Masonic symbolism because they have no idea about Masonry. And I can just sit back and just kind of chuckle at it. So there you go. But anyways, let's get back to this. Robert, you had mentioned that the devil always looks kind of wily, or depicted as a kind of comical, sinister type of character, at least in some portrayals. And up on the screen here, I actually have a picture of Pazuzu from The Exorcist. Now, Pazuzu claimed to be the devil in the movie, and then turned out to actually be Pazuzu. But what I noticed about Pazuzu is I guess it's a he, yeah, I mean, it would be a he, has an erect penis. The erect penis, to me, what that symbolizes is wiliness, forgive the language here, but, you know, fuckery, just general fuckery. Like, he's a mischievous trickster type of entity, and it's not so much that it's an evil entity, but more of a wily, uncontrolled, materialistic desires, you know, things like that. I'm wondering if there's any correlation to the laughing devil and the mischievous kind of devil that's portrayed, like you pointed out earlier.
Right. Well, that image that you got up there That's actually, I use it. I actually have that exact same image in one of the movie books. I think it's in Cinema Symbolism too, although I have it for a different reason. The well, the devil is portrayed very nasty in The Exorcist. I mean, like I said, a lot of times, especially when you're getting the artwork, sculptures, the devil is kind of portrayed cartoony. The whole point I was making was in the devil lamp that I have behind me on the shelf on the mantle. He is very pissed off looking. He's a very sinister devil akin to the statue. The notion. I'll just get into a little backstory of the movie. The movie is based on a novel by William Peter Blatty, and in the novel, it's the demon Pazuzu. And this tied into Father Marin, who you see there, who's Max von Sydow. And this was more. They get into it a little more in. They hint at it in the movie. It's more profound if you read the novel. Was Marin had encountered Pazuzu numerous times in the past and had successfully exorcised the demon. So the two had like a rivalry going. And it's hinted at in the movie. Now, in the movie, they got rid of Pazuzu and just turned it into the devil. But yeah, I mean, the whole idea with the erect penis, this, you can look at this in the mythology with Pan, who was always trying to seduce nymphs. And, Pan, the imagery of Pan makes up for a lot of what, the devil imagery is. I mean, you got there with the statue. I mean, the one thing you should really notice right away is the one hand up and the one hand down. I mean, this is the, as above, so below of Hermes Trismegistus. You want to see that symbolism. It doesn't symbolize the Hermetic maxim here. This is taken off of the tarot card, the devil, who has the same imagery. It's the one hand up, the one hand down. If you want to see the same iconography in cinema, Jack Nicholson, who becomes the devil in the movie The Shining. Yeah, there you go. At the end of the film, when they show the photo hanging on the wall, Jack Nicholson in The Shining is in the same posture with the one hand up and the one hand down, signifying that he's the devil. He drinks the alcohol at 66 minutes, 6 seconds into the film. So that's when the possession. But the one thing that The Exorcist, the movie, does, they back away from the Pazuzu motif and they just go with the straight devil. But the one thing The Exorcist does very well is the horror. I mean, it's just the horrific nature that the devil is associated with. That's done very, very well. Classic, iconic image there from the movie. One of my all-time favorites, I might add. Great movie. I mean, very, very scary. Very, very well done movie as well. Loads of symbolism in it.
I know that's the only movie that's ever given me nightmares. I watched it when I was, I want to say, about 7 years old. It was on TV. My parents didn't know what I was up to. I was just watching TV. And I for 2 weeks straight, I was dreaming of Reagan in my bed. I'd walk into my bedroom and there she was looking at me. And so that movie really haunted me. I mean, there was something to it. And, it's funny, growing up, I thought like demonic possession was like something that we were really going to have to contend with.
Well, it is. It's very, that's what makes it very scary. And I agree with you. I mean, the movie, I saw it very young also, and it haunted me. And even to this day, I think it's a very terrifying movie. I mean, I've seen it, 100 times by this point, and I know it's coming
and it
around.
Keeps getting
corner.
funnier and funnier every time.
Right, like Beetlejuice. Yeah, it's. I mean, I think some of the really terrifying scenes don't come from the demon. I think. I always was really disturbed by the Spinal Tap scene. I mean, that's just really disgusting. I mean, and terrible. But no, it's a very horrific movie by all accounts. And I agree with you. I think it's very haunting. I think it probably gave me nightmares. I know I was, it's one of those movies that I think one of the things that's really scary about it is it's psychological terror. Because you watch a movie like, for instance, I mean, they're good movies. I'm not knocking them or putting them down. But I mean, you watch a movie like Halloween or Friday the 13th. I mean, there's the monster. You can run away from it. I mean, if there's a vampire tormenting you, okay, I can hang garlic around the outside of the house. I know the vampire doesn't like holy water. I know it doesn't like crucifixes. If I don't invite it in, it can't come into the dwelling. The werewolf. If I've got silver, I'm okay. But how do you defend yourself against this thing? a little girl. I mean, how are you supposed to defend yourself against something you can't see that's going to take possession of you? I mean, that's really something that's scary. Like I said, I know how to take care of a werewolf, or a vampire. But how do I stop a demon from possessing me? I mean, and you can imagine that when that movie came out, I mean, people after they saw it were just flocking to the church. People I think were returning to religion after that movie. I mean, and it is. It's a very scary movie. It's very well done. That movie is just. I mean, they've really put that thing together well. I mean, just the makeup on the little girl, the voice of the demon. I mean, it's
Well,
I mean, they
Linda
did a
Blair
great
did some
job.
interviews after the fact, and she said that she had a really hard time because anywhere she would go, people would think that she was really the devil. And she
Who,
had to
Linda
go into
Blair?
hiding for quite some time.
Oh
That
yeah.
led to drugs. She got busted for heroin or something like that because the downward spiral that she went into as a result. It was actually very, very, very sad. Um, the Exorcist too. They get more into Pazuzu and
Yeah,
the background of Pazuzu. So
that's right.
we watched that film with the eyes of a feminine being, the divine feminine being overrun and destroyed. And it seemed to be the destruction of the feminine. I know I mentioned this on a previous show. I don't know if you've had a chance to go back and actually watch the second Exorcist. It was a terribly made movie, but the
Oh
story
yeah.
behind it was amazing.
Yeah, it's been. I'll be honest with you. I'm not a big fan of the movie. I've seen it, but it's been years since I've looked at it. And I'd have to go back and look at it to take to take. I'm sure there probably is symbolism in it. It wouldn't surprise me. And when you get in these religious movies, there almost always is. The Exorcist is very well done. There's lots of hidden symbolism in that movie. We'll get into it maybe the next time I'm on. We've probably talked about it before. The whole interplay with light versus dark,
Hmm.
in the film, and I know I've talked about it on your show before. I won't go back into it, but the first Exorcist is very symbolic and has a lot of concealed imagery in it. I talk about that in the first movie book I wrote, Cinema Symbolism. In fact, it's the very first chapter of it. But yeah, the Exorcist. You're right, absolutely. They do get into the Pazuzu motif much more in the sequel than they do in the first one. In the first one, they just kind of wrote Pazuzu off and just said, "Oh, it's the devil." I think it worked for that movie. I think in the first movie, the way they did it works really well. I wouldn't change it. But I'll have to go. I know you mentioned that to me before. I'll have to go back and look at the second one. It's such a terrible movie, though. I mean, it's just. I think it's been voted one of the worst sequels ever made. And I know I've seen it before, but I got to be honest with you, I've never really liked it.
Yes, but in that movie, Linda Blair blossomed into a very nicely blossomed flower. So that was also a plus about that movie. I was just watching the other day Dominion. I don't know if you saw this one. This was the prequel to The Exorcist. It came out a few years ago. They actually made two movies. The first one
Yes.
wasn't scary enough, and they went back and redid it. It was about a church that was built and then buried. And then when they excavated the church, they realized that nobody had ever used it. The stones were basically brand new, and it was keeping this demon trapped
Right.
inside of it. Have you looked into the symbolism of that film?
I've watched both versions of it, and I've only seen it like one. I've seen it like one time again. I remember not really caring for it too much. There could be stuff in it. I've always said, and I'm sure I've said this on your show. When I do these this analysis of these films, it takes more than one viewing to do it properly. I mean, there are movies. I was on another show, and I'll say it on here. I mean, there are movies to this day I've seen dozens of times, and even to this day, I'll watch them again and see something brand new that I've missed in these other viewings. Um, I know the movie you're talking about, the Exorcist prequel movie. I know exactly what you mean. It was like they made it twice. I've seen both versions, but I haven't really sat down to analyze it. But I remember the movie, what you're talking about, where they buried the church, and that's where the demon was. It wouldn't surprise me if there wasn't symbolism in it of some kind, but I definitely would have to go back and take another look at it before I could comment any further on it.
Okay.
What was it? Did you see anything? Or
Not really. It was
no,
difficult for me to watch because it wasn't a very good movie.
no, no.
And it was a shame because the first Exorcist was it was phenomenal.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The first one's. I mean, the first one is a classic. I mean, it's. I mean, I think you could really craft the argument. It's probably the most scary movie ever made. I wouldn't have. Any bones to pick with that analysis or that take on it. It's a very good movie anyway. But I mean, there's all kind of little hidden symbolism, and I mean, I mean, there's a whole interplay with light versus dark. It starts in the desert of Iraq, it ends in the freezing cold. The one thing you'll notice with the demon is whenever the demon is manifesting, it's frigid. That comes straight out of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, where the lowest rings of hell are frozen. It's not a fiery pit; it's a frozen wasteland. So what they did was it's very archetypal imagery. When the demon is manifesting with the little girl, you can see your breath. It's freezing in the room. I mean, that's very well done to conjure, inferno from the Renaissance. I like it also where Karis is sort of the little girl's. Well, not sort of. He is the Christ Savior. He's going to be the guy who exorcised the demon. He's the apothesized Savior, the Christ figure. When you watch the movie, pay attention to it. Pay attention to Karis. He's constantly in a state of ascension. He's always walking up a hill or walking up steps. And what the filmmakers did that was very clever was when he's introduced into the film, he's walking up a flight of steps, of course. He's coming onto a subway platform, and he's coming up from 33rd Street, of all things. And that is a clear Christ reference to the 33 years that Jesus, the age of Christ at his crucifixion, the 33. So that's investing Karis as the Christ figure who's going to be the savior of the little girl, which of course he is at the end. Very, very adroit by William Friedkin there. Loads of symbolism. I won't get into. I mentioned it in some of the emails we were banning about, Halloween being over. I mean, I can get into it maybe next time, but loads of, esoteric symbolism in The Exorcist. I get into it much more in depth than the first movie book.
Well, I've got to ask you this, and I think the answer is probably obvious, but at the very end of The Exorcist, he throws himself down the stairway.
Right.
So is he descending again?
Right. Well, if you what that is that's a good point you bring up. I'm glad you brought that up because what if you pay attention to the film, Karis is going to be the savior of the little girl Reagan. But if you watch the film, he's in doubt. I mean, he constantly is doubting his own religion. He's doubting Christianity. So the whole idea with this at the end, there's something else you want to take a look at, is when he falls down the flight of steps, he's exercising the girl, but he's falling down. It's symbolizing his doubt about his own religion that he's had throughout the entire movie. So he gets the demon out, but he's basically failing in doing so because he's doubted his own religion, during the entire film. But we know the exorcism is successful because pay attention to the film the next time you watch it. Karis is you'll see it briefly, but it's there. When he's laying at the bottom of the steps dying and he's bleeding, you're going to see some spray painted graffiti on the wall next to him that says pigs. And that is a clear little subliminal there put in by Friedkin to conjure the New Testament tale of Jesus exorcising the demon Legion into a herd of pigs and then casting them. They fall down a cliff as well. And Christ was successful in the exorcism. So we know that Karis did, in fact, get the demon out of the little girl. It's recounting. It's a little subliminal to conjure in your subconscious mind the New Testament tale of Jesus exorcising the demon from this poor man and casting it into a herd of pigs, casting the evil spirit into a herd of pigs. Very well done by William Friedkin there.
That's interesting. I never noticed that detail, but I never questioned whether the exorcism was successful or not. And it picks up in part 3, where I don't know if you've seen part 3, but it's
Yes.
all based around Karis being possessed by the devil, and he's in a mental institution.
I've seen it. I've seen Exorcist 3. It was one of those movies where I liked it. It's been years. Again, that's another one that since I've seen it, so I couldn't take on any sort of analysis of it or dissection of it right now. It was one of those movies where I kind of liked it. I thought it was okay. I didn't really dislike it, but it was one of those movies where I watch it once, probably wouldn't watch it again. But it's been such a long time since I've seen it. Maybe I'll give it another look and see if I can find anything in it. Who knows? Take more than one viewing, though. I can tell you that.
It was very similar to Halloween in the sense that it revolved around a detective. Halloween revolved around a doctor. You
Right.
know, it was yeah, it seemed to go more towards the line of I guess typical slasher type of horror instead of psychological. So I I don't know. I didn't really
Yeah.
enjoy the film very much, but I remember as a kid, I
Yeah.
went and saw it in the theaters. We went and bought tickets for I don't know some G-rated movie, and then snuck into the R-rated movies as we always did when we were
Of course.
11, 12 years old. Yeah,
Yeah. What else? Right.
exactly, exactly. One movie that, and I'm going to let you go here in a few minutes. One movie that I don't know if you've looked into is Jacob's Ladder.
Oh yeah.
That was
Oh my
another one we
goodness. Yeah.
snuck in to go see at like 11, 12 years old. What's the symbolism behind that?
Oh yeah, there's loads in that one. That's a very good movie. I talk about that in Cinema Symbolism too. I have a whole section on Jacob's Ladder. Really, the raw material in that movie that supplied the movie that became The Sixth Sense years later. I like Jacob's Ladder. It's a very Gnostic movie. It's what is real, what is not real. There's some very subtle symbolism in it. It has to do. I find it as a very Gnostic movie of this guy. It's alchemical and it's Gnostic. It's one of those movies that kind of walks a fine line where he's coming to this epiphany that he's not alive, but is he also transitioning into something else? It's a fine line they walk. It's a very it's a very good movie. I really like it. It's an interesting movie to take apart because it's one of those movies where I like it because it incorporates both the Gnostic and alchemical element. Usually, movies are one or the other. This kind of flirts with both of them. Of the whole idea of having this epiphany where you're waking up to something else, but he's also transitioning into something else, and I like that aspect of the movie very much. There's some very interesting alchemical symbolism going on inside that movie. I'm going to let the person. It's too long to get into. We won't have time with a little bit of time left, but the person can read the book. But it's a very good movie, and yeah, there is some very hidden symbolism in it. The guy I should point out who directed that is a guy named Adrian Lyne. And his movies are usually contain symbolism. He's a guy. He's not very talked about a whole lot. Usually people are talking about Hitchcock or Kubrick, but you could put him up there, or Aronofsky. His movies are very symbolic. There's a lot going on in them. Jacob's Ladder is one. He did one called Fatal Attraction with Glenn Close, which has some very interesting veiled symbolism. I talk about that in Cinema Symbolism too. And then he did in the mid '80s a very erotic movie called 9.5 Weeks, which has some interesting symbolism as well. I get into that in both books. I touch on it in Cinema Symbolism. I get into it much more in detail in Cinema Symbolism too. He's a very he's a very gifted filmmaker. Adrian Lyne is. He knows what he's doing, and he knows when and how to use symbolism. But yeah, Jacob's Ladder is a classic. I really like that movie. And if you haven't seen it, if you're watching this, you haven't seen it, by all means check it out. It's really the forerunner to M. Night Shyamalan's Sixth Sense. If you watch Jacob's Ladder, you'll see where M. Night Shyamalan was getting the Sixth Sense from. And yes, it's a great symbolic movie. Has some interesting hidden themes in it. By all means, check it out and check out the book.
So it seems to me that the symbolism, and I'm just speculating here, but it's to speak to something that's inside of us, that is this gnosis that is inside of us that we don't even realize in the conscious mind or even in the subconscious. It lays somewhere deeper. And when a filmmaker can put all the symbolism in there, they're not only talking to the conscious mind, they're not only talking to the subconscious mind, but they're talking to that deepest part of us where all of this gnosis is kept.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. Yeah, this is what Jung called the collective unconscious. These emblems and symbols and themes and religions and mythologies that are just inherent to us all. This actually goes back in time to the Greek philosopher Plato. He called this the theory of forms. We all know what the color red is, right? I mean, we all know what a table is, and that's the table, and that's a chair. You picture it in your head, and it doesn't change. And yes, I agree with Jung's take on this and Plato's as well, that there is this, hidden reservoir in our subconscious minds that these filmmakers are definitely tapping into. And what I like about, doing this work and doing these studies is, and especially when you get into the guys who know what they're doing, like I said, like the Kubricks, the Lines, the Aronofskys, even the Spielbergs and William Friedkin, people like that, is they know when to use it, they know how to use it, they know when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate. They'll use some symbolism in this movie, but not in another movie. Kubrick is very, very good at that. So is Aronofsky. Like Aronofsky uses a certain theme of symbols in Black Swan, but then in the movie Mother, he uses symbolism, but it's a different type because he wants to convey something different. I mean, that's the real hallmark of a master craftsman. And even John Carpenter does this with Halloween, Escape from New York. So, these guys, they know what they're doing. And, I think it's, when they do it and it's done right, it makes the movie into something else. It makes it really modern day mythology, and it puts these subtle undercurrents in the movie that are there. You can't pick up on it necessarily. Your subconscious mind will, but the idea is, and one of my motivations again for writing the books is to make what was unknown known, to unveil and pull the curtain back on this stuff, so you'll know it when you see it, and you'll know you're watching something else other than what was put on celluloid, these hidden themes and symbolism that is sort of beneath the celluloid. It's there that convey these very deep themes, where it's religion or Gnosticism or mythology or Kabbalah or numbers. It's there, and they all contain different meanings. And that's part of the study also, is finding out the proper context is how it's presented, because, and this is really critical to the study, is a certain number or a certain image can mean one thing in one movie, but depending on the context could mean something completely else in another movie.
I have one more comment and one more question. The comment is something that just connected in my mind when you said John Carpenter is a master craftsman. I thought to myself, master builder, Freemason, et cetera, and then that led me to the idea of Jesus was a carpenter. It's hidden in plain sight. It's right there. He was a master builder as well. So the final question, because people are asking in the chat, can you talk a little bit about that statue that's behind you? Not the devil one, but the one that you said was a really, really dark motif.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do is, in order to explain what that is properly, I'm going to have to get it down off the mantle. I'll tell you what I'll do is, I know I'm scheduled to come back in January. I will take it down off the mantle. I have it with me, and I will gladly go over it with you. It's a very, very dark artifact, though. Very, very sinister. Has a dark history to it.
Oh, excellent.
So you're gonna have to.
So you'll have to tune in January 6th.
Yeah, I'm coming back on the show, I believe, in early January. I can't remember the exact date. I will promise you I will go over and explain what the object is next to the devil lamp. Very, very interesting dark artifact, to say the least.
Excellent. All right. Give us your websites real quick, Robert, please.
Yeah, let me give you my website. There's one other thing I want to plug. The website is my name. My name is Robert W Sullivan IV. So the website is www.robertwsullivan.iv.com, all connected, all lowercase, robertwsullivan.iv.com. There's links there to buy the books. You can get the Kindle or the ebook or the print edition. It's available on all the main internet, online retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. You can get it off of all of them. If you're overseas, like in Canada or like in England, it'll be on Amazon Canada, or Amazon England. So they're all over the place. If you go to the website, there's links to buy the books, links to my social media, follow me on Twitter, links to my YouTube channel where all this stuff is archived. Hundreds of radio shows I've done, podcasts I've done. Certainly the website, like I said, is updated routinely with upcoming events, appearances, information about me, book releases, book covers, anything going on. The site is constantly updated. www.robertwsullivan.iv.com. It's a very easy site to navigate. And let me just promote this real quick, or mention this. I am in the process of consolidating all my Facebook pages down to one. I can't use the ones with the books are too complicated. It's too lengthy and arduous for me to update this, update that. So those Facebook pages for my books, Cinema Symbolism 2, and the Royal Arch of Enoch, those pages are about to be phased out. They will be gone probably in the next 24 to 48 hours. You have to go and like my brand new Facebook page, which is my name. It's Facebook /Robert W Sullivan IV. It's the number 4. Go like that. That's being constantly updated by me. I just created it a couple months ago. I made it public about 2 weeks ago, probably less than that. Go and follow that page or like it, because the other pages are going to be, there it is on the screen. The other pages are going to be phased out literally in 24 hours. So go become a fan of this page. It's updated constantly with information about, upcoming events, information about me, information about, my books, stuff like that. It's Facebook /Robert W Sullivan IV. Become a fan of that page, because the other ones are literally in 24 hours will probably not exist anymore.
Excellent.
And I promise when I come back in January, I'll have the object down off the mantle, and I'll go over it with you and the audience, and you can ask me about it.
So it's an actual artifact, though.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
It's a sculpture. It's a sculpture that has a very dark history. The object itself is dark. It is sinister, but who it belonged to and what it is really dark.
All right, you're gonna have to tune in for that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm excited. I'm wondering now what's going on. I'm like, oh my God, he's gonna leave us on a cliffhanger here. But I think that's the best way to end the show. So I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much for your time this evening, and have a good rest of the evening. Anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
Oh yeah, no. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Chris, for having me on Beyond the Veil. I look forward to coming on in January. Please tell Cherie get well soon. We got to have her back next time. We do this. It was a great show. Thank you again for having me on. You're one of my favorite people to be on with. You really have a real good, deep understanding of the material. And again, thank you for having me on. I hope everyone enjoyed the show. And again, go like that brand new Facebook page. Like I said, there's links to it on my website. That's brand new, not brand new, but the other pages are being phased out. So again, thank you, Chris, and have a good night.
Excellent. Thank you. Have a great evening. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in this evening. I think we're going to wrap it up here in a few moments. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat room, please, and I'll try to get to them. But I'm exhausted, and the little twin is not feeling good. As you can see, the owl is here taking her spot this evening, keeping her spirits here. So I guess I'll take a quick break and maybe keep it going for a few more minutes, but I don't really like to be here by myself without my little twin, because we come as a pair.
You must unite what has been set asunder.
All the conflict and strife throughout history, all the fear and hatred, serve but one purpose: to keep my master's wheel turning.
The coin is still turning.
All souls were prisoners, trapped in the pointless round of existence, leading distracted, blunted lives until death returned them, always in ignorance, to the wheel. But what hope had they then?
There is no escape.
It was then I knew what I had to do. I alone could end this.
And it was then I saw.
So, I am revealed to you at last.
What in hell?
I am the origin of life, the devourer of death. I am the hub of the wheel, the purifying cycle to which all souls must be drawn. You would be wise to heed me.
Your words are heartening. For you would not fear us unless we could truly do you harm.
No! You are nothing!
False God. This is the end. The final turn of your wheel.
Fear not your trials and tribulations. When you have overcome all adversity, you will then be able to harness the power required to access raw consciousness. Then, and only then, will you truly know thyself, as you travel even further, beyond the veil.
All right, so we got a question from the chat room. What does Lime Lodge mean to Freemasons? And I don't know. It's interesting because I've never heard that term before, so I Googled it, and I can't really seem to find it in any specific writings. There's the Freemasons Chronicle here. I'll show you what I'm looking at here. The Freemasons Chronicle, but when I click on the link, it doesn't actually take me to where the word lime is used, but this seems to be like a publication for Freemasons going back to the 1800s. Scrolling down a little bit more, you see a couple of other references here, but again, you know, this says the lime of meeting specified is as necessary to be observed as the blank. The lime. It sounds like a misprint. Straight line mortar. I don't know. I will have to look into that. That's pretty interesting. Maybe you can enlighten us a little bit in the chat room. Let's see if anybody's using the call board. Maybe we can take a few calls here. Oh, yes. Zachary Hubbard is on air right now. So Zach has the phone lines just loaded. Like, if you're not tuning into the shows at TFR, HTTP, I don't know why I said HTTP. I'm used to writing it that way. TFRlive.com is the website. And there's a lot of great shows like Zachary Hubbard, who always takes calls about gematria and things like that. I am a little bit exhausted, so I don't know if I can keep this going. Jackie Cat said, I'd love to ask some off-topic questions about ayahuasca stuff, but go relax with Cherie, and I'll catch up with you next Saturday maybe. I would say ask away. You know, we can get into some ayahuasca discussions here for the next 10, 15 minutes, something like that. Somebody else said in the chat room, lime is a glue, and it could very well be. You know, when you said lime, I think of limestone and how in Egypt a lot of the stuff was made out of a limestone that was very specific, that had crystals inside of it. They're like 30% crystals. So that's transferring information and things like that. Maybe Chris can make Cherie some veggie soup. I actually went and got her some chicken noodle soup. I got her some veggie soup. I got her several things. And oh my God, the organic grocery store is freaking unbelievably expensive. Like, I got 4 bags and it was like $300. And I'm like, this is absurd. Like, it's getting to the point to where it's ridiculous now. But I was looking at myself going, you know, I gotta start eating good. I gotta start putting good food into my body, because even the organic vegetables from this grocery store around the corner here, horrible. Really curious about your thoughts on purging, for one thing. Jackie Cat asked that. So the ayahuasca purging, that's a great topic. So the ayahuasca purge, it's something that you don't do every single time. And when you start to advance through the experiences, it comes to a point where there's nothing to purge anymore. But the purge is not only cleaning you out physically, but you're also purging the energies that are inside. So there's been times when I've been facing some traumas and things like that. And it's not until 2-3 hours later into the experience that I'll purge. And I'm purging right at this point to where I'm dealing with some kind of negative energy. And it's the negative energy coming out. There was actually a time when I purged and Cherie heard it growling. I'd been working on somebody and removing a bunch of negative energies. And I got those negative energies tied to me as I was doing it, which is why I became very particular about who I do energy work on. Especially if these people are just going to turn around and just go entangle themselves in the energies. Then it's just a complete waste of my energy in order to do that. So that's very important if you're doing energy work and things like that. feel out the situation and make sure that your energy is not going to be wasted, especially when it's a really, really, really heavy energy that you're dealing with. Because some people, they love their negative energies and they love to be attached to them. They say they want them removed and they want somebody else to do the work for them. But when you do the work for them, they'll run right back to those energies and just tie themselves up again. And it comes to it comes right back to what I've been saying is you have to remove the energies yourself. You have to learn how to do it for yourself. But back to purging. The purge is purging negative energies. That's the whole basis of it. But then you come to a point to where you no longer need to purge because there's nothing to purge. I mean, when we were at during the eclipse, I hadn't been fasting or anything like that, and I purged up just what I drank, and that's it. And it was, I mean, not even as much as I drank. It was less than what I drank. It was just, some foam and stuff like that coming out. In the Great Pyramid, I purged buckets full of stuff, and I hadn't eaten anything all day. Buckets full of stuff. I don't know where this was coming from, but it was stuff that I needed to expel before being able to journey. And we had just drank ayahuasca just a couple of nights before that in the Temple of Isis. So I purged not nearly as much in the Temple of Isis, but at the Great Pyramid, I needed to release everything. I mean, literally everything. I think I purged up Chris Geo is what I was purging up, like the three-dimensional self, purging literally everything out of me in order to be able to go do this. But then we come back here and I drink and I'm not purging anything at all. So if that's why you're asking the question about the purge, is that okay, yeah, no, I'm glad you elaborated, Jackie. Am I missing out if I'm not purging? Do you believe it's an important thing to purge out the bad stuff? Yes, but if you don't have any bad stuff in you, there's nothing to purge. So, if you're not purging, I would say it's a good thing. It means that you've hit those next levels. Let's see if there's any more questions here. I don't see anything, and I'm starting to fade a little bit, so I guess we'll wrap it up there. But I'm glad you asked that question, and like I said, I would say that you are at the next level now, and I can tell by your experiences, by how you've been commenting and sharing your experiences, that you've taken these to deeper and deeper and deeper levels, and that's so wonderful to actually read about and to hear others doing it, because that's the whole purpose. I can tell you what's beyond the veil, but when you see what's beyond the veil for yourself, it's a game changer. So I don't see any more questions coming through in the chat, so kiss the one you love right now. You never know the last time it's going to be. I'm going to go make some chicken soup for the little twin, and I can't give her any kisses, though. That's what sucks. I've been trying to stay a little bit away because I don't want to get sick, too. That's the last thing I need right now. So we'll see you on Saturday, hopefully, if the little twin is feeling better. But yeah, everything will all work itself out. Love ya. Thanks for tuning in.